Baruchim Abam, and welcome to the Kinus Torah. I believe it's the first Kinus Torah for Tashin Peivav in honor of Shavuos. So it's a good psicha for the rest of the world. To start the Kinus Torah, I want to start with a little of a background to how it started and the Rebbe's yachas to it. So the Kinus Torah started in the year Tashin Yud Ches. Tashin Chai by Rav Mordechai Mendel, who was Rosh Shiva in 770. That first year, their Fabring, as usual, on the second day Shavuos. During the Fabringen, the Rebbe said a very, very deep Simcha regarding the Taina of the Malachim, why the Torah should be given on Shemayim. And after the Simcha, the Rebbe said that this Simcha I said as my ishtatzvos, as my contribution to the Kinus Torah. Then the Rebbe added that just like the Torah was given in the Midbar, and we know why, because just like a Midbar has no owner, so too Torah, no one can say I own Torah, rather everyone could say it belongs to me. So too the Rebbe said in regards to the Kinus Torah, that whether you were personally invited or not personally invited, everyone should come and join the Kinus Torah. Later on, Tashin Lamed Aleph, there was a very bomb sikha over there regarding that we should einem develop durchlim the Torah to take over the world through learning Torah. And the Rebbe said, Eretz Yisrael, they should make kinusim, as well as in New York, they should make kinusim. To bring out the Rebbe, how much the Rebbe appreciated, how much the Rebbe viewed the Kinus Torah, there was a story that once the Rebbe walked out of 770 during the Kinus Torah, and the Rebbe saw there was a chassim who was speaking to his future father-in-law on the sidewalk outside 770. So the Rebbe asked them, what's going on? So the chassim told the Rebbe, I speak to my future father-in-law about plans for the chasana. So the Rebbe told them, for that, you can take off time from sleeping. Right now, you guys should both go into the Kinus Torah. They mentioned them both to go inside. So we'll start off Pesachim B'dvar Malchus. I'm going to call up one of the Shluchim. They were sent to Australia. A Bachar Tov Mashliach Simcha Liberow.
Shavuos is different than all other Yom Tovim in the sense that regarding Shavuos, Hakol Meidim Ba'atzeres Tib'inu Nami Lachem. It's brought down in the Gemara that Lagabi Shavuos, everyone agrees that the joy and the celebration of the day needs to express itself in a physical way as well. Regarding the other Yom Tovim, there's a machlekes in the Gemara whether or not the joy and the celebration needs to be expressed also in a physical way, or could it be entirely expressed in a ruchnistic way through davening and learning. But Lagabi Shavuos, everyone agrees that it needs to be expressed in a physical way as well. And even according to the halacha, that all the other Yom Tovim, as well as Shabbos, the joy and celebration of the day needs to be expressed in a physical way, there's still another difference between Shavuos and all the other Yom Tovim. All other Yom Tovim, a person is allowed to fast a tainis cholim. Why? Because although there's a chiyuv of einik Shabbos v'Yom Tov, but nevertheless, being that in this specific scenario, the person is distressed and he's saddened by his dream, Memela, dafka fasting is what's going to bring him pleasure. So that's the way he expresses his pleasure on Shabbos and Yom Tov. However, regarding Shavuos, being that Alter Rebbe writes that a person needs to dafka eat, a person needs to eat and rejoice himself to show that this is a day which he's at ease and he's very much accepting of this day which the Torah was given. Memela, he's not allowed to fast. In other words, there's a key difference over here. Lagabe the other Yom Tovim, there's a chiyuv to have pleasure on the day. Now that pleasure is generally expressed through eating and drinking. L'payil though, it could in rare occasions also be expressed through fasting. However, regarding Shavuos, there seems to be a specific need for the joy to be expressed in a physical way, because that's the day Shenitna Be'atera. So the Rebbe asks, l'chayr it's not understood. The me'adim of Pesach and Sukkot are both a remembrance primarily to the Chsadim Gashmim which transpired on those days. Pesach is all about celebrating the day when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, our freedom. On Sukkot, we're commemorating the Anani HaKavod, Ki B'Sukkos Yeshavti B'nei Yisrael, connected to Chsadim Gashmim. Shavuos, however, is connected to Chesed Ruchni. Shavuos is all about the Eibshter giving us the Torah. And Davka Shavuos, which is connected to Chesed Ruchni, the joy of the day needs to be expressed in a physical way. And for what reason? Because it's the day that the Torah was given. So the Rebbe says, L'cheira, it's a little bit hard to understand. So to understand this, we need to first preface the general chiyuv of Einik Shabbos and Yom Tiv. The Rebbe writes that the ikar chiyuv of Einik Shabbos and Yom Tiv is through achila u'shtia, which is why that even if a person fasts a Tainis Cholam on Shabbos and Yom Tiv, nevertheless, he needs to fast an additional fast on the weekday to atone for the fact that he didn't eat on Shabbos and Yom Tiv, which means that the main chiyuv of Einik Shabbos and Yom Tiv is dafka through achila u'shtia. And even more, the only heter to fast on Shabbos and Yom Tiv is only for a fast of a Tainis Cholam. But if a person stamazeh wants to fast, even if it's for the sake of tshuva v'chsidus, nevertheless, a person is not allowed to fast. It's usher. Why? Because a person is not allowed to switch the form of celebration which the Chachamim instituted for a different form of celebration which could be experienced on any other day. It doesn't need to be specifically on Shabbos. So the Rebbe asks, the whole tachlis of eating is only that a person should experience pleasure. The whole Yisai to eat on Shabbos and Yom Tov is only for the Einik Shabbos. Which is why, the Alter Rebbe writes, Mitzvah Suda Shabbos, Eine Ela B'Shvil Einik. It's all about experiencing pleasure on the day. Ad Kedei Kach, that is considered to be a mitzvah which is Tluya B'Dasa Adam, it's dependent on the das of the person. Which is why, sometimes a person could also fast the Tainis Cholam, because Legabe his Maimud Matziv, that's what's considered to be Einik. So if that's the case, why were the Chachamim misakin the chiyuv in a way that is dafke through achil u'shtia? The Chachamim should have allowed each and every person to choose how he wants to express the pleasure of the day, how he wants to have hana, how he wants to have einig on this day. Why did they institute that specifically achil u'shtia is the way for us to experience pleasure? So the Rebbe explains that Torah and mitzvahs were given to us the way our neshamas are in gufim, the way our neshamas are enclosed in physical bodies. Now the purpose of Torah and mitzvahs is like the Maimer Azal, le'nitnu ha-mitzvahs el letzaref be'emes habriyos. The mitzvahs were given only to purify and to refine the creations. Memela, the neshama itself is not in a state where the neshama needs refinement. Al Rebbe writes in Tanya, neshama atzma eina tzricha tikkun. The tikkun, which mitzvahs are supposed to accomplish in a person, is not so much by the neshama. The neshama is fine even without it. The neshama eina tzricha tikkun. It's primarily the guf which needs to come to the tikkun of kedushas ha-mitzvahs. So Mamela, it's understood that the whole nekuda of Einik Shabbos and Yom Tiv is davka that the body should have pleasure. In other words, when Torah commands us to have pleasure on such a day like Shabbos and Yom Tiv, Torah is not only commanding us that on a ruchnius diga level we should have hana, we should have Einik. But adirabba, the ikar ha-mechuven, the main intention is that the physical body should experience Einik. And that's the way the kedusha of the mitzvah is able to permeate not only the neshama, but it's able to permeate even the body. Masha'enkin a tainus of tshuva, or any other tainus. So even though the person may be feeling pleasure, but it's not a pleasure which comes mitzad the guf. And even if the person doesn't have any tsar from fasting on the day, either because through Aveda he managed to work on himself in a way that he shouldn't feel any pain, or naturally it's not so painful for him to fast on the day, nevertheless, the guf mitzad atzma always has pleasure in eating. So even if you're fasting a tainus ol tshuva, and you're maybe not so pained by it, but at the end of the day, the guf doesn't experience pleasure, because the pleasure which a guf has is dafka through eating. And that's why the ikar chi of Einik Shabbos and Yom Tov is dafka through eating and drinking, because the natural Einik which a body experiences is through eating and drinking. That's the way the body feels pleasure. So the Rebbe says, this is also the reason why the only heter to fast on Shabbos and Yom Tov, which is brought clearly in Shas, is a tainus cholam. Although there are also different scenarios where a person's allowed to fast on Shabbos and Yom Tov. The Rebbe says that the Yesod heter the fact that there could be a mitzias where a person is not in tune with the kavanah, where a person fasts on Shabbos and Yom Tov is only because he's in a ma'amid matzav of cholim. He's in a ma'amid matzav of concealment. He's not conscious and aware of what his neshama is supposed to be doing with his body. He's not conscious and aware about the effect that the mitzvah is supposed to have with his physical body. In other words, we're not dealing with a person over here which doesn't conduct himself according to Torah mitzvahs. We're dealing with a person which tries as much as he can to live his life according to Torah mitzvahs. So how is it shayich that he should come and fast on a day like Shabbos and Yom Tov? Says the Rebbe, the only explanation is that he's in a ma'amid matzav of cholim. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah on the pasuk Hayinu kecholmin, that we're sleeping, that when you're sleeping, you're lav dafka in a state of seichel. A lot of times, the only keach which is in sleep is a keach adimi. You're imagining stuff. You're not in the matzav of seichel. A person doesn't see stuff the way he generally does. Memela, the fact that a yid could come to fasting on a day like Shabbos and Yom Tov is because of his ruchnis dike cholim, the fact that he's lacking that conscious and awareness. However, being that Torah provides guidance even to those people which are in a matzav of cholim, so Torah says, if taka, you had a cholim, you had a bad dream, so you're allowed to fast at Tainis cholim. The Rebbe says, according to this, we could also understand the difference between Shavuos and all the other Yom Tov. The Gilei Lekus, which took place by Shavuos, was different than the Gilei Lekus legabe the other Yom Tov. Shavuos was a time when the very essence of the Eibishter was Nizgala, which is why we find that the Gilei Lekus of Shavuos permeated the entire creation, it permeated the entire world. Ad kedei kach, that the Koil of the Aseret Hadibros was heard from the Dala Druchos and Mamayla Mamata to the extent that Tzipor Leitzavach, Shar Leiga, the birds weren't chirping, the oxes weren't goring. The world was at a total state of bittul. Eilam sheisek u'machrish. The world was silent and still. Because the gilui of the etzem of the Eibishter permeated the entire world. Ad kedei kach that even the daimim, even that which is inanimate, also was absorbed by the gilui of Matan Torah, which is why there was no echo from the stones, from the daimim, because it permeated even that which is daimim. Mitzad, the fact that the Eibishter said, "Ano nafshi ksavis yahavis," that I'm placing myself within the Torah, and like Chassidus explains, "Anechi misha anechi," yeah, the etzem of the Eibishter is Hashem placed His essence within the Torah. Memela, by Matan Torah, there was a gilui of the very essence of Hashem Himself. And being that the Eibishter is everything, and there's nothing in this world which limits the presence of the Eibishter. Memela, as soon as there's a gilui of His etzem, so it permeates the entire world. It reaches every single madrega. There isn't any space where His essence isn't felt. And that's taka why, the reason why we dafka have to eat on Shavuos is because it's Yom Shenitna Be'atera. Being that the Gilei Lekus of Matan Torah was a Gilei of the etzem of the Eibishter, Memela, the Simcha, the joy which needs to be felt and expressed on that day, needs to permeate not only the Ruchnis, the world, but even Gashmias, the Geilam Hazeh. It needs to permeate not only our neshama, but even our guf. Our guf, our body, needs to feel pleasure from the fact that this is a day that the Torah was given. Lagabe, the other Yom Tevim, so the Gilei Lekus of those days are connected to Eretz V'Giluim. It's a Gilei of the Eibishter, but not necessarily does it permeate every single existence in this world. It's taka revelation of Him, but not necessarily does it reach every madrega. And that's taka why, if a Yid is in the Maimon Matzav of Cholim, so the Gilei doesn't reach that space. But Legabe a Gilei of Etzem, Legabe a Gilei of the Etzem of the Eibishter, when we're speaking about the essence of the Eibishter being Nizgal in this world, so there isn't any space where His Gilei isn't felt, there isn't any space where His Gilei doesn't reach. Umemele, it reaches even a space of a Cholim that a Yid should come and have pleasure in the fact that it's Shavuos.
Okay, Simcha. I forgot to mention earlier that throughout the years, the Rebbe had a big kach that the chidushim that was said over during the Kinus Torah should be written down and put it in a kavetz. So, Hashem, after the Kinus Torah, we're going to try to put all the chidushim that were said in the next kavetz aris. So we're asking from all the Mishtatzim to write it down afterwards and send it in. Hashem will print it in the next kavetz aris. And the word of Be'inan Ami Lechem, that on Shavuos is a chiyuv also to have Tainun Gashmi. So the Simcha and Tafshin Nun Aleph that the Rebbe spoke once all the Chassidim came back from Talucha. The Rebbe came to the front step in 770 and said a small Simcha. Over there, the Rebbe said two pshatim in Be'inan Ami Lechem. Number one, the Rebbe said that Be'inan comes from the word demand, that we need. So in Shavuos and Atzeres, it says man ha-muchshar to Be'inan, to demand. Na'im Lachem is gematria Katz. So in Shavuos it says man, it's a demand from Mashiach. Later on in the Sikha, there were also mentioned in the Aris that HaTamim means the whole entire world. We know in Shavuos, the Gilui Kos came Lamata. So such a strong Gilui that HaTamim, everyone agrees that Be'inan, Na'im Lachem, that Mashiach has to come because of this Gilui and Shavuos. For our next speaker, I'd like to call up the Yeshiva of Yeshiva Gedela, Rabbi Cohen.
I know it's Shavuos, Matzoi Chag HaShavuos, Yisur Chag HaShavuos, and therefore it's a bit peculiar to speak about Binyomin which connected with Chag HaPesach on Shavuos, but nevertheless, Aval Pikein, I think it is Kedai, because in Torah there are no chilukim. So I heard from HaMashpir of Shlomo Chaim, who used to say that in Lubavitch, they were not interested in what time it was. They said, Ma'amorim of Rosh Hashanah, they had learned on Pesach, and Yom of Pesach, they learned on the middle of the year. They were never makbid, because why? Why in the makbid that Inyan should be Bismana? The Welt says, always says, Dove Bismana, Inyan Shazman Grober. But here, if we're talking in Torah, Mitzvah Torah itself, everything it's one Torah, and every Inyan in Torah is Nogeh every instant of the year. It doesn't really make any difference what the time is. Therefore, I'm permitting myself to speak about an Inyan which is Nogeh to Chag HaPesach Be'ikar, even though we are, say, not holding now exactly in Chag HaPesach. And this is with regard to B'didi Uvda. I happen to be this year in Artsas Abris, in Florida, Miami, on Chag HaPesach. It's not the first time I've been the time of Pesach. For this year, for some reason, it occurred to me more the shilas with regard to the Mechiras Chometz. The bailus on Chometz, when one finds oneself in a different part of the world from one's Chometz. That the chometz could be in one place, and the bala chometz is in a different place. And the shilas which come aroused in halacha, serious questions which become aroused in halacha as a result of this, what is one supposed to do exactly with regard to getting rid of one's chometz? So, in this case, in this particular example, even though there are far more serious examples, but in this particular case, let us say, like most Jews who possess mashka and such, that is the chometz normally by most Yidden, who have mashka. I have mashka in Melbourne. So my mashka is in Melbourne, and I am in Miami. And fine, Shalom al Yisrael. Well, it's not quite Shalom al Yisrael, because you have two different time things, and the time Pesach comes in Australia is about 15 hours earlier than when it starts in Miami. And therefore, for those 15 hours, you have to make sure that you don't have chometz at that time. So this is the beginning of Chag HaPesach, Erev Pesach, and the first day of Pesach is one part of the Shaila, and the other part of the Shaila is on Motzoi, and Achron Shel Pesach you have to make sure that you don't have chometz then either. Now, let's define the thing in halacha. Exactly what are the tzadei hasofik bezer? What exactly is the problem? Al pi halacha, what could be the problem when we're talking in people in different time zones? When the owner of the chometz is in one time zone, and his chometz is in an entirely different time zone. What could be the problems? Well, very simply, the question over here, and this is a very old Shaya, it's not a new question over here, which has just been discovered. It's at least 100 years old, the Shaya has been spoken about by Achronim already. This is the question with regard to the Issa. If there's an Issa, of course, we're talking about Bal Yeroi or Bal Yimotze. A Yid is not allowed to possess chometz during Chag HaPesach, at any part of Chag HaPesach. With regard to that Issa, how do we view exactly the timing of that Issa? Is this judged by the place where the chometz is? Do we say, according to that place, if the chometz is in Melbourne, for example, then the Issa starts according to the time, the clock in Melbourne? The fact that I find myself somewhere else on the other side of the world is totally unimportant. It's still my chometz. And if my chometz is governed by the clock in Melbourne, the fact that I'm sitting in Miami, and in Miami, it's Pesach, it's many, many hours away from Pesach, won't help me too much, because the chometz, the Issa of Bal Yeroi, will depend on the chometz itself, and the chometz itself is in Melbourne, and in Melbourne, the Pesach started 15 hours earlier, and the Zman of Bir chometz started 20 hours earlier. So that is one part of the Sophic. Do we go according to the place of the chometz where it finds itself? Or do we say no, we go according to the place where the Baal HaChometz, the owner of the chometz, where he finds himself? If it goes according to where I find myself, then I'm sitting in Miami, and it's fine, and in Miami is Yud Gimel Nissen, so a long time till Chag HaPesach. The fact that I have chometz in Melbourne, if the chometz, the Issa of the chometz is dependent on me and on where I am, it doesn't make any difference the fact that the chometz is in Melbourne. It goes after the Gavra, after the person, the Bala chometz, where he finds himself. And therefore, because of that, I won't have to get rid of that chometz until in Miami, where I am, it becomes the time for getting rid of chometz. And similarly, with regards to Achron Shel Pesach, it's also the same shayla, the other way around. If in Melbourne, Pesach, if you go according to the chometz itself, well, in Melbourne, Pesach finishes much earlier. And I'm sitting in Miami. So if we go according to where the chometz itself is, then it comes out that the chometz is in Melbourne, and in Melbourne there's no Pesach anymore. Achron Shel Pesach is finished. The Hatzudas HaMashiach finished. Habed Avdollah finished. End of story. Nothing to talk. No worries. But if I go according to the person, the Baal HaChometz, if the Baal HaChometz is sitting in Miami, and for him it's still Achron Shel Pesach, and his chometz, it goes according to his time, and he has chometz, and the chometz is in Melbourne, that could be a problem. So whichever way you go, this could be, we'll see. With regard to Australia, Berman, it's a much lighter and much less of a problem. But let's speak about the etzem thing itself. The etzem sofik itself, as I said, whether you go according to the chometz itself, or you go according to the owner of the chometz and his position, that has been discussed by Achronim for over 100 years, and there's been, as we can say almost predictably, no clear result with regard to this question. They bring rayas from this Gemara, from that Gemara. By no means, no one has can claim or has claimed that this is absolutely definite, that the halacha is kach or the halacha is kach. There are different opinions, different rayas, but nothing definite. So therefore, we are left with a suffix, the classic suffix over here. Because of that, the Minchas Yitzchok says, and those other svarim which come later bring his words with regard to this, that most opinions seem to hold that we go according to the place where the Baal HaChometz is. That is most opinions. But nevertheless, you should be machmir also according to the opinions that go according to where the chometz is. Be machmir both ways, in other words. All right, so now we know. Because of this suffix, we have to be machmir both ways, and we can... That's end of story. It's a pretty not unusual to hear such a maskana in halacha. Unfortunately, whatever way, or fortunately, whatever way you want to look at it, but it's not very overly satisfactory. And it's a problem in certain cases. Not so much so for people in Australia, but we'll see. But for people go from to an earlier time zone. You go from America to Eretz Yisrael, for example, which there are thousands of Jews who go from a Yidden, who go from America to Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael is several hours ahead of America. And therefore, there's a problem for that with regard to an Erev Pesach, with regard to making sure they got rid of their chometz and how they sold the chometz, etc. All right, so now let's get down to the knowing that we have over here machmir both ways. What does this mean in a practical sense? What are the problems in the practical sense? The problem in the practical sense is very simply the way we get rid of chometz is we sell it to a goy. Very good, you sell it to the goy. And you can sell it to the goy before you leave, wherever you are. You can sell it to the goy, good. But the problem is that the mechira, what the achievement of the mechira of selling the chometz to the goy is not the act of selling the chometz to the goy. That doesn't achieve anything, just to the act of selling him, making a kinyan with him and selling him. However well you do it, what gets rid of the chometz is the goy's acquiring the chometz, and the goy doesn't acquire the chometz till a certain stage, a certain point. I mean, we don't sell the chometz to the goy several days before Pesach. We don't sell the chometz to the goy even on Yud Gimel Nisan. Even then, it's not sold to the goy. The chometz is sold to the goy on Erev Pesach, the hours, normally the Shor Chamishis, on Erev Pesach, at the time when you can no longer eat the chometz. But you still have ownership over the chometz. That is the time, the most obvious time to sell the chometz to the goy, because what are you going to do with the chometz now? It is going to become oser b'hanor. You soon won't be able to get rid of it to sell it. But at the moment, it's only oser b'achila, so that is the time that you have the chometz till the last minute. And here, the guy doesn't acquire it till the last minute. So you have full use of the chometz till it's actually sold. But once that mechira is chal, in the Shor Chamishis, so that's on the morning of Erev Pesach, then that's it. So the question is over here with regards to this, that if the mechira is if you go to a place where the issa of having chometz, if you're going to be in that place, and the issa of having chometz, like Eretz Yisrael, which is ahead of America, you have chometz in New York, let us say, and the several bottles of mashka you have in New York, you'll come to Eretz Yisrael, but the mechira will not be chal in New York till Erev Pesach of Shor Chamishis and Erev Pesach in New York. The Shor Chamishis and Erev Pesach in New York Pesach has already started in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, if we're going to go according to the person, the Baal HaChometz, say that he is also to have Chometz already in Eretz Yisrael, and he has Chometz. He has Chometz in New York, because the Chometz wasn't sold yet. The Mechira was not yet Chal. The act of Mechira may have been done before he left New York, but nevertheless, the Chaluis HaMechira, the actual change in ownership of the Chometz, hasn't yet taken place, and he's sitting in Eretz Yisrael, he's sitting in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, and Pesach has already started, and it's what's going to be over here. And not only that, but even if Pesach hasn't yet started in Eretz Yisrael, but if you go according to the owner of the Chometz, Pesach, the Chometz has already become Oseh B'Hanor, even on Erev Pesach. You can't sell the Chometz after Chatzos HaYom on Erev Pesach. And he is sitting in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, and it's already then after Chatzos HaYom of Yud Daled Nisan, and now you want that his Chometz should become now sold in New York, but it's his Chometz. So if you're going according to Mitzad Ad-Din, and if this is what Roiv Achrim say, you go according to the Mokum of the Baal HaChometz. Well, if they go according to his Mokum, it's already Pesach, and if it's already Pesach, then the Chometz is already Oseh B'Hanor, and if it's already Oseh B'Hanor, he can't sell it, and therefore this sale, which is taking place in New York, theoretically, is non-existent of his Chometz. So he remains in ownership, full ownership of the Chometz throughout Chag HaPesach, because the sale didn't take place, and if he's over Nisa D'Oraisa of Bal Yeroah, Bal Yemotze, if you're going according to the Baal HaChometz, the Mokum of the Baal HaChometz. All right, so of course these are serious, very serious matters, and we are not talking nowadays about a few. I remember many years ago, I'm talking 60, 70 years ago, the Indian of a Yidden not being at home on Pesach was almost unheard of. Pesach, Chag Pesach, you're home. It's Chag Pesach. Nothing to talk about. Hotels, the Indian are going to a hotel. The Pesach was a place. Man was a beles breira, so the Yid wasn't so that makpid on Pesach anyway, etc. This is not the matzav bizman hazeh. The matzav hayom and his hoylach mizgaber. The matzav is there are thousands and thousands, literally thousands and thousands of Chumah Yidden who are going Memokim Lemokim every year, and this is about a growth rate of about 75% per year. It's something like, with Beli Guzma, we're thousands of Chumah Yidden now going to Pesach programs all over the world, all over the place. And Kama v'Kama Mehem, many of them are going from a place which is a later Zman of Pesach to a place which is an earlier Zman, like Eretz Yisrael. Many of them are going to Eretz Yisrael. At any rate, I'm saying this is the Shaya, the questions, the problems over here are not something which is just an Indian of the past or Hilchas Mashiach. We're talking now about something which is Mamish Negeh, Midi Shona B'Shona, and Hoylachim Izgav the Shaya. The question, what can be done with regard to this when you're going to an earlier place, even though for Australians, Australia, there's not that much of a problem, because Australia is ahead of most other places in the world. So in most, it's less of a problem for Australia, because in general, when you go from Australia to another place, you're going to a place which is an earlier Zman in the set. It's behind us, and not ahead of us. But when you're going from America to Eretz Yisrael, which is ahead of us, Eretz Yisrael is ahead of America, then the problem on Erev Pesach becomes a much bigger problem. At any rate, looks in the Svarim Kedarkum bring, they keep on, each one quotes the other, etc. They copy from each other with regard to Sveikas and Maskonas and the Mitzay and the Maramekaimus, etc., etc. There's not much original material published with regard to these inyanim, especially in the Sifrei HaKitzur and the Likutim, etc. Nevertheless, I think that I would like to suggest ulai. Perhaps there could be over here, with regard to this matter, a fairly simple, straightforward solution, even though I'm not sure how practical it is, but nevertheless, in a theoretical level at least, something which is a fairly simple solution to this problem, given this suffix that we have over here. Whether exactly how to be done, the Indian kafi, the person or the kafi, the chometz, there's a fairly straightforward solution which one could say, and that is to make two mechiras, two sales of the same chometz. You will ask, how can you sell the same thing twice? You can't sell one thing twice. You can only sell it once. Once you sold it once, it doesn't belong to you anymore. So you can't sell it. You can't sell it twice. Impossible to sell it twice. Well, perhaps it's not so simple that it's impossible to sell it. I mean, it's already brought down in Achronim, bring down already in the Pri HaSoda, there's a Jewish Pri HaSoda from HaRav Deitch from before the war. He brings down, he said he's heard the minig in America is they sell the chometz many times to many Rabbonim. They sell the chometz to many Rabbonim. How can it be you sell your chometz to many Rabbonim? He explains how you can sell your chometz to several Rabbonim, not just through one Rav. But the explanation he gives won't help us too much, because the explanation he gives is that you don't really mean to sell it to more than one Rav. You only mean to sell your chometz to one Rav, through one Rav, you're selling your chometz. But since there's an inyan of giving a parnosa, helping a Rav with his parnosa, and the minhag is that you give a few matbeas, or more than a few matbeas, to the Rav who is matzrich himself to sell your chometz. Asher al kain, therefore I sell my chometz first through one Rav, and I reward him accordingly. And then I go and I mahan another few Rabbonim with the same thing, but not that this has any meaning. It has no meaning bichlal, because I sold it because what? Because my intention is to after the first Rav. But after that I'm going through an inyan of a mechira, ki'ilu, as if I'm doing a mechira. I'm not really doing a mechira bichlal, I'm just doing it in order to be mahana the Rav, or to give him some money for selling the chometz for Pesach. But be'emes, I say that in halacha, there's no such thing as selling one thing twice. You can't sell it twice. You can only sell a thing once. Once you sold it, it's not yours anymore, obviously. All right, but say that. So if you say that, then there's no such thing then as be'emes two mechiras. It's non-existent. Nevertheless, be'emes, we have heard a shmua, and I'm not responsible for the accuracy of this shmua. I have not the faintest idea whether this is accurate or inaccurate. I have absolutely no documented evidence with regard to any accuracy for this. I've heard, nevertheless, of the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he came to America, when he was in America, we're talking Mistoma about Tovshir, about 1930, Tovresh Tzadik, Mistoma, we're talking about Mistoma, that's the time, or maybe Tovshir, and I'm not sure. That he sold his chometz twice. Whether he sold the chometz in Europe, but he sold chometz when he was in America. In America, he sold his chometz twice. Kach shomaiti. And so I don't know whether there's any mocha, any yesod for that he sold his chometz twice. I don't know. Well, I say in halacha it's impossible. You cannot sell a thing twice. It's a year. It's such a thing. Novos, what could be, perhaps, ulai, something al derech, the inyan of selling twice, and this is an eitzah pshuta with regard to this. There's such a thing as a sofik, a mechira. When you sell something, you are selling it with gemiras das. The main thing of the sale is your smichas das, your gemiras das. You made up your mind. You're selling the thing now. That's what makes the sale a sale. Like in Yonim is brought in Haloch and Shulchan Aruch and Kama v'Kama Mekomas in many places. You can do it in Yonim al t'nai, on condition. And the mokum of a sofik, if there's a doubt, you can also do it al t'nai, on condition. And you can make a t'nai, a condition, because there is a sofik, because there is a doubt, and I don't know I cannot solve this doubt. I remain in doubt. Therefore, does that mean I can't? It doesn't mean I can't do anything. I can do on condition. A simple example we have, by Sfiros Oimer, they brought down a Shulchan Aruch with regard to the Zman of Sfiros Oimer. A person can count the Oimer al Tnai with have an intention that if the halacha is so, then I want to be Yotze, and if it's not, then I don't want to be Yotze now, but I'll be Yotze with the second time I count. You can make a condition. It doesn't stop you performing the action. The fact that rather the chalus of that which you are doing, you are not sure whether it will be chal or won't be chal, whether it will take effect or won't take effect, you're not sure, so you make a condition that if the halach is kach v'kach, then I want it to take effect, and if it's not, then I don't. Asher al kein lich'eira, I would think that with regard to a sale, for surely, selling something is in a tzna, you make conditions on dovasheba moment in yonim transactions, financial transactions. I am selling the goy my chometz. I do not know now whether I need to sell this goy my chometz here sitting in Melbourne. Should I sell my chometz to the goy when I'm in Melbourne? Or should I sell my chometz when I get to America, the Yudal Nisan Erev Pesach in America? There I sell my chometz, the same chometz. I'll sell it to the goy over there. Well, I don't know. Good, very good. So I will sell the chometz then here in Melbourne before I leave. I will sell the chometz to a goy, make a full arrangement to selling that chometz to the goy al tnai, on condition that if the halacha is that we go according to the mokum, we go according to my chometz should be sold according to the place where it is, then this chometz is going to become osa in the clock in Melbourne, Yud Daled Nisan in the afternoon in Melbourne, after Chatzos Hayom, Yud Daled Nisan in Melbourne, Australia, then the chometz is going to become osa. If that is the halacha, if the halacha is like that shita, that it will go according to the mokum chometz, then this sale to the goy in Melbourne will be chal. There should be a mechira. If, however, since I don't know, but if, however, the halacha is not like that, if the halacha is that we go according to the mokum abailim, the place where the owner is, and therefore the chometz should be sold at a later time and acquired back at a later time, because according to the clock in America, so I'll go to America. When I'll be in America, I'll sell to a goy, and if the mechira, again, al tnai, on condition that if what I did if the halacha is we go according to the mokum abailim, then what I did in Melbourne is invalid, hasn't achieved anything, and now will be a mechira irichal now in America and on Erev Pesach lich'eira. That is a tzna you make both ways. You have to when you make a tzna, you make a condition, you have to make it in the right way in accordance with the halacha. And maybe this is a reason why, one of the reasons why that such a thing, I haven't found it suggested to do such a thing, because it's complicated making t'noim. You have to fulfill all the conditions of a t'nai and to rely on people that they're going to be able to handle the situation with all the pratim of a t'nai with regard to this. It's lav davka that you can rely on people doing this fully in accordance with halacha, and it just only takes one thing to be missing when you're making the condition, and then you can be over an issa d'oraisa as a result of this. The whole thing can become but theoretically, at any rate, on a theoretical level at least, I think this is one of the simplest solutions which you could have for this, is to sell the chometz in both places in accordance with the zmani hamokum, in a way in such a way, and sell it al tnai, and then whichever way works, we don't know halacha berura in this inyan, but at least you've covered both bases with regard to that. You sold al tnai, and if you do it al pi halacha, is lich'eira that should be Dova HaMaspik, that should be in order to be Yotze L'chol HaDeus, and I'm surprised not to have seen this at least mentioned at least in the Sifrei, the Sforim which are done B'inyan Zeh with regard to what to do, then they should not say that they give this, at least this is a theoretical Eitzah, at least an ideal sort of Eitzah. At any rate, but given that, to get back to the situation in Australia, at least with regard to this Apel Mamash, because we're talking to people who live mostly in Australia now, and they're going to go to other places afterwards for Chag HaPesach. They're going to places which are later, therefore, Erev Pesach itself is not going to be a shaila. If they make a mechira b'mekayimon before they leave Australia, they arrange the protei mechira. Everything is arranged before they leave. Then it will be chal on Erev Pesach in Australia. No problem with regard to that. Wherever they're going to find themselves afterwards, it doesn't matter because they've already sold it in Australia. And if the problem comes then on Achron Shel Pesach, which on Achron Shel Pesach, then it's the Yom Tov finishes in Australia earlier, and they're sitting in America, and he's a Yid, Achron Shel Pesach, you're not allowed to have chometz, and Mendel, they've got chometz in Australia. So what are they going to do with that? All right, so there's the Rabbonim informed me over there in Miami. It's not a problem. You don't need to worry about it. Just have a rotz, and most Sforim say the same thing. You just have in mind not to be Kohen. I don't want to be Kohen. The guy, the Achron Shel Pesach, the guy will give you back the chometz. So I don't have to be Kohen from him. The guy, I don't want to be Kohen. You can't force a person to be Kohen of something if he doesn't want to be Kohen it. So therefore, you just wait, you make sure that no one's going to use that chometz until the time in Australia. Nobody should use the chometz until you've finished in America. You finished your Chag HaPesach in America 15 hours later. Make sure that no one touches that chometz in Australia till then, and then it's Shalom Al Yisrael. I said that for people in Australia, it's a very, very small problem. The much bigger problem is the other way around, when people are going from America to Eretz Yisrael. But anyway, Hashem Yazor, we should be able to be Mavara. Halacha, I don't know, Shaykh being such an Indian to say Mavara, such a suffix in Halacha. Veisich nishtu al kol podim, Yagdil Torah v'yadir.
Shekeach, thank you, Rabbi Cohen. I'd like to take the opportunity to give Rabbi Cohen a bracha on behalf of all Talmidim, Shluchim, everyone in the room, as Yarech Yom HaMalachte, Gesundheit, Fechtigkeit, continued teaching, having Madrich Brachrim, till B.S. Gel Tzedek, maybe speedily right now. Amen. For next speaker, I'd like to call up the Rav and Dayan of Yatz Avram, Dayan Katz.
I'm going to start with a minute of the Bedichese. I talked to the Shlichim that Eitzem in Lubavitch hat sich gepasst zu reden, le'oilem yilmet udem v'lushen Rabboi. Der Lubavitcher Rebbe redet doch Jiddisch, besser wie ich. Jede Wort wird rausgesucht auf Jiddisch, kann ein Wort nicht, kann Englisch. Ich will gehen in der Mitte. So, English, I'm not so good. Ich will noch viel ruhig. I want to, because English is not my first language. I'm coming from Canada, but the Lamida Chal was not so strong. Halavai, what me gekteen, also wie mit dit in a Halle Teure in Crown Heights. Wir meinen die Ilme, die wir kein Yasi, und wir kennen sich bei kein Unlamida Chal. Is reden in der Mitte, ein bisschen Englisch und ein bisschen but going zwischen the Tropen. And if somebody doesn't understand, maybe with the time you're going to hear the Bieren von dem Reben is a Sach stärker, wie man lernt von einem Cipher. Weil steht wie hier, Udam le Nefesh Chayu, sucht der Targum le Riech me Malelu. nefesh chayu asaldan alive is to hear the biram, not only to look in the cipher. So the beste wat man gedacht kann in Jiddisch der Lubavitcher Jiden, mit der Zeit, mit Neibischen Silf. A Kapunem is wir reden von beidem. Probieren the beste, was man kennt mit Neibischen Silf. Neibischen Rangehen mit der richtigen Wörter. Der Chushe, wer es Yeshiva du, is mekam dem Isri Chagba Avoyse, bestein wir jetzt, Isri Chagba Avoyse, wat kann es am Isbayach. Man weiß doch, als Azeres, Schwieres, is doch Azeres from Pesach. It's like the Achron shel Pesach. So the Roshei was talking from Achiras Chometz. We're going back. Isri Chagba Avoyse, man darf nehmen dem ganzen Yomtov, Pesach, mit der Sphire-Teig, und man darf das heranbinden, das ist halt, von Talmidei B'Shem-Tov, Isri Chagba Avoyse, the Tachlis von dem im Teufel is like an injection. It's a vaccine. Every Yom Tov, normally man fragt a Yid, so is Dorach the Yom Tov. There's not such a thing, Dorach. There is a Nigen, was man singt von einem Kedisches Leive, der Heilige Berditschewer, Gott von Avruam. Stamm weiß, it's Gott von Avruam, von Yitzchak und Yaakov. So the Tosher Rebbe used to say, man sagt, der Shabbos Kodesh geht da weg. Stur sagt, Shabbos Kodesh geht nicht da weg. Shabbos Kodesh geht. Die Teufel is going with the, sie begleitet im ganzen Yomtov. Jede Yomtov hat gesagt, Vaccine. Pesach ist der Minne. Sikkes ist Simcha. Mit der Gereden von Kabulas HaTorah ist, wo geht ins Yomtov von Schwiees. Sie du Shesh Zechiris. Stell mich vor der Oilem, such du Shesh Zechiris. Shesh Zechiris, the strongest, stärkste Wörter. What we say, what the Zechiris is, Raki Shumer, Lechu, Ishmoir, Nafshach, Meyoit, Pentishke Chazad Vurem, Vashroi Anechu. Man Tisker, sie haben Zeit gewährt, man Tisker, sucher es Hashuus, Locham Mulak, but Raki Shumer, Lechu, Ishmoir, Nafshach, Meyoit, Pentishke Chazad Vurem, Voidatum, Levenechu, Levenechu. That means, this is the most important von alle Shesh Zechiris. Wir müssen das eine puschte Sache. Ich gegeben das Seires an Divrei, das ist doch ein Neuche, Shamele Keichu, Kol mit Zvesechu, Amina, der Kabul ist all. Aber nehmen Sie daran, so, if it's so important, so why you're not making a poil demyoni? Chol apuches, like Pesach, we're eating matzahs, yeah? Man legt es around in a keile, at Shetechpotz. Sikkes, we're sitting in the Sikkel, man jade da recyclen. Weil Chol apuches, man bringt around ein bisschen Blätter, ein bisschen Blime, statt Haminik, but why in the Torah, there is no such a mitzvah to make a größer bark, and a fire on top. So man hat schon Zeicher, so sagen ein bisschen Zeicher, mach ein bisschen Keule se Brücken. If it's so important, wenn Tischke gesagt wurde, man schrui an Echo, machen etwas a Sach. The Maß ist also, we are talking, such an important thing, is the Nekida Apnimius, you're talking here to Chabad, yeah? Chabad is Chochmah, Binne Das. I'm not so booky in the Tiefkeit von Stamm kennt es besser Chassidus afschir. Aber bekluli es mir reden alpi Pashtus und wir sagen, so du Pshat Reimes der ist sagt, what is Chachma, what is Binne, what is Das? Chachma is the Pshat. Ein Mensch, kann das sagen Chachma, das ist Sache Yedias, kann weiß wie viel Sterns, how much stars is du in Himmel, kann der Chachma sagt China, lass mal sagen. Was ist Binne? Binne geht schon daran mehr in Oymek. Verwusst du an so viel Sterns. Geht daran mehr in der Tiefkeit von der Sache. What is das? Was ist das? Das ist der Touch, his Kashrus. Das ist der Touch, das er haben mit der Ire, mit der Eure, das er haben, als er Techpotz. Chochmo bagoyim tamen. Teure bagoyim al tamen. Was ist der Chilik? Der Chilik ist, Aristo was der größte Kuchen von Hatmimim so oil und weiß man doch. There is a question why the Rambam is bringing Aristo, because they found Aristo, he was doing things like a Bahaima, Mamash a Bahaima. So they asked him, what's going on? In the college, you're talking from Divrei Misser, mit Nemisam, mit Avschofieren, der Geret. And you're, was geht es? Nou, als we beginnen, zo heeft de Heilige Rish met Atu Evdaltu Enesh Maroish, like Isaf. Isaf was more Chuchem than Yankov. As Sugas from Isaf was more than Yankov. But the head and the give were two separate things. Atu Evdaltu Enesh Maroish. He can't bring in the Chachma in Lamaisa. There is no Kesher. Zwei Sachen. Chachma. There is a bekannte Maße mit der Pschmiel Monkes, ja? Der Eulam weiß, ob sie den Nummern, ja? That he wants to travel to zum alten Reben, Karl Jasny, gewollt fuhren, and was standing on the road, people went through, nobody is going to Jasny, so, Baruch Hashem, getroffen auf Wogen, der ist auf Wogen, wo sie fuhrt, ja. So, but the Balagula say is full of bronfum, yeah, and Surah doesn't have place. So, it was cold also. So, hat gesagt, he gonna go zwischen the Fässer der Arang. Hat sich ein Eiz gegeben, der Fässer am Shem beschützen. So, he was there. A kurze Zeit, bis er gewesen, der russische Frest. So, geworden gefreuen. So he decided maybe he's gonna drink gab ma vodka. Wie lange kann ich leben, so reingeben. So he asked the Balagula, can I take maybe from the Fassel to nehmen a bisschen Bronfen? But not too much, only a bisschen. So he trinken a Gläsel Bronfen, ist geworden warm. And so when he came to the Chassidim, he has a derech and avoided Hashem. What was the derech and avoided Hashem, the Mr. Haskell? You can't be surrounded with Fässer mit Bronfen. Doesn't make you warm. Warm is, sie geht heran in dem Gift, sie geht heran in der Weinig, sie wird ungewarmt auf der Masse. The Pshat is, the Tachlis, in Samargat is 3 days. We can say it like it's Chochma, the first day, the second day is Bina, and now is Isra Chag is Das. Isri Chag Ba'avoisim. We need to put it in the Ba'avoisim, around in a Kaila. The first night, the first day, we have 2 days Yom Tov, the Benai Chitzle Uretz. First day is Chochma. Don't understand. Zweiten Tag hat man mehr around, Beoimek in the Teure. But now is the Chaylik, Ivui Chilam Bevris Yachat, Nase Venishma Omre Keichat. But Nase is the Nekiddes Misaberzam Varem. So trinkt a Gläsel Bronfen. If you are cold, there is no Nase. Avada is Nase Koidem Lenishma. But Nase allein is auch gut nicht. There was a probe, the workers what they are preparing, Zigigrai dort for guest. Und sie haben sich geschleppt, Matratzen, Betten. So they took 1/2 from the workers, they say, when you're doing the work, you shall, that you are making exercise and that's very healthy for you. But for the other part, andere Heilig hat man gut nicht gesagt, sie haben gearbeitet. So at the end, they make a bedike mit der Beide gewesen. Die sind gegangen mit das, mit der Simcha, sie haben verstanden, sie sahen at the Eiles, they had a gewaltige, sie gehen für sein Gesinn, sie gehen a gitte Diet, und sie haben gehabt Exercise, und geworden stärker. The other part, they do it with noch einmal, und kann Chaischik, und kann mit der Karriere, mit der Kaltkeit, so sind geworden kranker von dem, sie haben sich geplugt, und sie gehen mordig schwer. So that means we need Nase Venishma. But the Nekide is Als mizan rak shumer lechush mo nafshich me yoit. Pentishka chasad vure mashanuya neichu yoim asher matl van Hashem lekechem b'choyer. The Torah sucht nicht, you need to remember the Aseres Adibros. The day, the koiles broken, the pachat, the yerel, here oizchel kol hayomim. Du see the nekide fin shvias. You can't make a pol dimyoini for a pnimius. Neshayach zu machen. There is a alter Belzer Chuset, in roller, from Fatsatische Lepchen, in roller roof at geheißen. Somebody came to him, and he say that I have an older father in his davening, also wie de verzaag met gedampt hamur met azah bren. We have in Montreal a Peretz Mutschkin. You heard about him. My father was his shoichet. He used to eat from his schiete dafke. Vtule Junek, die alle haben gegessen für mein Tatens Schiete, gekent davenen 6 Schuhe nazi. There was somebody passed when he was eating a cracker mit a bissel Bronfen. Somebody told him, Peretz, git an Appetit. He was jumping up like a snake was a Schlange hat ihm gebissen. We are working to take away the appetite. Saying appetite. The pshat is, so he say that maybe you want to make a video from him like he's davening with his the Vikers, with his bren, and that he can give it over for the children. They're gonna see what Zaide they had. So he told him, I have a better idea. Better idea, you shall look like your father is davening with the Busre Bren, and you shall make a live video. The video is not live because you don't say then a shumma. Even you're going to say, see Rebbe Lemailer to the Alter Rebbe Shakelt Lilav. You will not see, you can't see the Kedisha, the Labas Aish, the Sharuas Ashchina. Mach di azoi wie dan Seide. Du zog de Pusik. Rake shummer lechush mo nafshich me yoyut pentishke chasad vurem yoy masher matol Hashem lekeche b'choyre. Wo hoi datam levenechu v'levenai v'nechu. Gab iber dem bren, dem chayshik. I was saying, one of the time, there is much time on why we eat chulav. Ich mein, also dem Beschwies ist mir angefallen nach Chiddish, what is the symbol from chulav? I think it's, I don't know another machel, you put it on the fire, and it's jumping a river, es gießt sich a river. A bisschen heiß wird, and es spritzt a river. You need to do the avodas Hashem, wo datum leveneichu zu sagen, Teufel al menas lat vier zu sagen, levenei v'neichu, atzav kaladoires. Das ist chulav. A brenn darf sagen. Aber wieso kippt man sich zum Brenn? Wieso ist es gar durch noch ein Jahr? In noch ein Jahr, es ist Nase v'nishma, in jeder Jid, everybody is taking Kabulas. In Maftieren ke de Esmol, what's going on? There's a mushel, a shine mushel. Some Mr. Haskell. There was a big elephant. Somebody came to the zoo, and they said a big elephant, and it was wie ein Ziegebin with a schwache Strick mit a pole, and he was standing, he was going out, but not too and gegangen water, he was standing near the pole. So he was wondering, what's going on? Such a big elephant. He can with ein Schlepp, kann rausschleppen, the ganze Maße mit der Erde zusammen. What's going on? Elephant is a smart guy. So he asked the man what's going on with that elephant. So he answered him, I'm going to tell you a pushete Sach. That elephant is born here. When he was a small elephant, he was mit dem Ziegebin zu dem Pole. And he tried. He was, Mama hat gerissen Stücke, ist nicht gegangen, weil dem ist noch gewesen, he was a small elephant, he can't go out. So he grew up together, he gave up. He gave up. So now, even he is bigger, he is the same thing like before, because von Unheibun ist nicht gegangen, now he is älter. Das ist the ganze Charm. Everybody thinks, last year was the same thing. Why shall I change now more than before? It doesn't understand that now he's older maybe. Die Atzrara nicht dasselbe. So this is in the kid, there was a man was in the Moshe Zirkind, and there was old woman, old man, and they were sitting together and was talking, the alte Yidden. So he was a Chassidischer Yid, thinking he's talking to Aisha, maybe he shall make a shidduch together. It would be a good shidduch. So beide sind gehen zufrieden, trinken L'chaim, chusen mit der Kalosche. The next day he came very sehr ungezeugen. So the Frau fragt them, why you're such a pressure? So he say, I remember something was here, we were talking, and we were talking from a shidduch. I don't remember if I say yes. Oh, so the woman say, Machaya, because I remember I said yes, but I don't remember for whom and for what. So that is the ganze Masse. Nase v'nishma. A day after, you don't remember what you say. And there was so much Kabulis, maybe. So is 8 knows, and the main thing is, like the Chofetz Chaim was saying, when the first telephone came up, my schwer sich Groner Liberow, he has a Rebbe, the Manchester roof, Rav Schneebalk. He was his Rebbe. Mamash when gesagt, Shema Yisroel fire. The first time you bring him a tape recorder, he felt chalushes. Mamash chalushes, gechalished. He doesn't believe that the words can be taped. So you can't, like the Ein Roya. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was, will in Zigreiten zu dem Ein Roya. Also du a Cheshbon. Also du a Sachwek. Also der Puse gesucht, als der Helzer von Stieb wird dann der Eides. Der Eibischter will ins Wasen bei Micha, es ist nicht kein Chachmas. Es ist nicht kein Chachmas. So I'm saying, take it from the good side. Chulaf is also a moiridige symbol. Fin is chatches. It's not the same milk from yesterday. Busar, the selbe busar. Chulaf is changing 2 times a day, like Krishma dat meleinen 2 times a day. Ke die Yit gema chadusha is chatches. The main thing is missing these chatches. And du se gewende Baal Shem Tov HaKudosh. Daran gebringt des Chassides. Du se mechadisch, der Mensch kann sich banaien, wird ein neuer Mensch. So the technology today is going so fast, geht so schnell. Sie tauscht sich so schnell. So if the Doimim can sich changen, so why can I, the Medaber that ich kann changen? Sie geht Kalvachaymer, Kalvachaymer, make a change in your life. Sie geht so schnell, aber der Mesilas Yeshurim sucht, the größte Problem von allen Problemen is there is no time. Litten Rever beim Parshel his Boinen. Lome Parshel sie Stimme. If it's a Parshel Stimme, is nist me a name velibam shel Yisrael. There is a small child. Here's 1 hour news. I was, ich gekennte alten Jid, wo es gewesen 60 Jahre in a Dorf. Ich gehad so viel Neues, no News. Wir können doch pushen zu dreit werden. Ich sage, Kapunem, als du so viel Neues, jede Rege, was hast du von den Neues? There is no news, Lekiyam. There is a news, was is Mekiyam, is teure. Dus bleibt allemal. So when you're looking for news, I'm going to ask you, you know all the news? What's important for you? Ivui kilom bevris yachat nase v'nishma omrike echot. There is, in Klal Yisrael, wie you see it, der Pshimim b'yichut gesucht, as chas v'shulem, shasi de teure shit stakich ma Yisrael. So Jean kann Halucha berieren, und Mishnah berieren Mukam Eichot. You see in the wool, there is Kolalem, learning only Gemura. From the other side, there is Kolalem, they're learning only Shulchan Aruch. There is no a connection. That is the Sibba, was the Shulchan Aruch HaRav hat gemacht Haluchas Betamayan. There is a gewaltige Oizer. Man kijkt an in Shulchan Aruch HaRav. Jede Wort ist ein Oizer, ein gewaltiger Oizer. You know, kennst schon auswendig dem Shulchan Aruch HaRav? Bist schon ein Jid. Ist schach zu sein, ein Jid, aber kennt nicht welche Shavuos. Jede Wort, du hast Zeit zu anderen Nahrigkeiten. Das ist doch der Jid, wo ich kill am Bevrissiyachat, Nasim ist am Bevrissiyachat, Haluchas betamayan. Und dem kann man doch kein Jid nicht an. Ist doch, wenn man sagt, there is a Wertel, aber es ist leider ein ämstige Wertel. Bei den Seminaren, bei den Gurus, der lohnt nicht Halucha. But in die Yeshivos, quetscht darin auf ein Blatt Gemurre, noch einmal. So after the marriage, the man had gericht dem Top. So the woman asked him, what's going on? That's all of ambition. No, Alpiyari, it's ausgehalten. So an anderer Halucha, what's going on? There's Boirer, Mikze, Alpiyari. So he's a Mekibbel. So she went home to his father, her father. Again, hat Talmidei Chuchem, sagt ihm, mit einem Gang, ich habe da einen Mann, was kann Kabul auch hat. So he said, I understand now the Chazal, Hamaisi bittel am Uret kile Kopsel ifnai Ari. That's Ari. So you need to know that du se der Yid, Nase v'nishma, Rambakken a Minna, wo killen bevrissiach, das Ramas auf Kedisha mit a Minna, Bucha Wakik v'miden alachas v'tzadik v'menuse yichya, so we are going away from the Heilige Yom Tov, Rakish Shumer l'chudem Yoim, Rambringen a Warmkeit. So I say for the Bucheram, when I came here, I understand why I came to Lubavitch. Lubavitch is the place, the Crown Heights. In Shavuos, the ganze Achune of Kaiser, from Kaiser, Mamlich sein dem Eibischen. That's the ganze Achune, not to talk till Kaiser. Das steht von Beshem Tov HaKudish. So Crown Heights, aufheim dem Kroin von Eibischen. There is a word von Heiligen Divrei Cheskel, Navet lo in Kisren. With what are we making crowns von Eibischen? Bemilin Yakiren. If it's coming, it's hard. As chules kushes, but make a change, any change, etwas geh marir. Leben nicht wie Abaheime jeden Tag, geht dasselbe Sache, dasselbe Gruß, dasselbe. Sie müssen an Eis Chatsches. Ich rede mir allein, ich bin nicht nur kein Misser sogar. Ich darf chasen von mir, Isri, Chagba, wo ist mit Kannes, Hamizbayach. Schächten sich von Neibischen. I was the first time when I came to Ukraine, and there was the Gabba, is Maße von wie viel Jahre? Das da am Chesm von 35 Jahre. So I was talking about, and he knows the matzah of the communism, what's make Mammash Charbunas leider. Ja, so I asked, so he was saying, two Hasidus, there was von der ist der meiste geblieben. 2 Hasidus. Weißt du, welche 2 Hasidus? Nu, was trachtet, welche 2 Hasidus? Was? Chabad mit Breslov, die 2. Because they were Simcha. The Simcha, der Geschmack, der gewaltige Messias, Nefesh, Karnes am Isbaich. Man geht weg von der Ayantov Schwiees, mit Chochme, Binnen, Das, Aranleigen, der Teure, im Kriere, im Teure, der ist ein Habe, Atsche Techpatz. Ich habe getracht zu rennen, ich habe kleine Halucha, es ist schon geworden spät, etwas Halucha, Puter, Beleukelimi, Efsche, das ist doch auch ein Halucha. Was ich jetzt auch noch geredet von Halucha, man darf reden Halucha, Huri, Lashem, Kale Uret, we need to be Mamlich, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kal Psia. So I'm happy to hear that there's 3 Pschneier, was heißt der? Nein, so? Nein, Pschneier, was heißt der letzte? Schmäler, ja. So he told me that he bring here the Kitzer Shechanurach and mit der Sufa Sabir mit 3 volumes and Baruch Hashem gelernt. Jeder sagt, Kol HaShoyna Aluchas B'chol Yoim Miftach I don't say Chedishim. Iker is a liket. So wissen am Maas Asher Yasam Zozan Ayid. So I'm going to talk about Bruches. Koidem Kol am Lenche Chanurach HaRav is the am solche Sanze Alucha is du 2 wichtige was man darf Handing wie der Maargen. 10 Minuten. Okay. Das ist eine wichtige Sache, wo es an der Kidde, wo es der Shechanurach HaRav fangt der Shechanurach. Es tut ja haye eure Rashacher. People want to learn the Shechanurach, not only kids Shechanurach, not dalat chelke Shechanurach. So the as Chule is ja haye eure Rashacher. A gewaltige Eize is bring the Shechanurach HaRav. Nobody is bringing that Eize. Nobody looked in all the Paskim, Mishnah Berira, Kafacham, nobody bring as a moiridige Sach. The Darka Moshe is bringing in the erste Sifkuten, bringt a Rambam von Moire Nevoichem. When einer steht auf, standing up in the morning, he soll mit Dame sein, that Melech Malchai Amlucham HaKudish Baruch is standing near his bed and he's asking him, Beitem, steh auf, weil ich darf dich wichtig, dass die 10 Mal avoide, das so Wörter von mir. Gott schickt der Eibisch, dass Maluchem, Srufem, Chais, Befana HaKodesh, Asher ein muss sagen, wo wieso se hello, we kritzach heimer, he wants every person here, if het aufgetein saß, jeder Jid du, was sitzt du, if hat gemacht am Ticken, wollte er nicht gewähnt, du. Also sitzt noch du in der Tatsch, als der Eibischter darf Jeder Jid Tatsch, der Eibischter steht leben am Bett. Und das ist auch der Heilige Darka Moshe, der erste Stickel Darka Moshe von Dalat Chalken Arbutier. Mehr hat Gott gestellt in Dalat Chalken Shechanurach. So, der Ramu, sagt er so, der Mechaber hat geheim eure Rashachar, so der Ramu sagt, if Schachboy, Jaidele von der Mie Scheuchef. So all the Prishim sagen, if Schachboy, wenn leicht sich schlufen, at night, soll wissen, von der Mie Scheuchef. Wie kommt der an für Schachboy? We are talking about the morning. Why is the Ramu is talking about the night? So there's a word von der Marper Beschlanger, that if you liked sich wie a Yid, steigst du auf wie a Yid. Wenn sich alles so sehen, man liked sich, dann steigt man auf. But the Emerson Aran, the Shulchanurach HaRav, sucht anders. Sucht wie Schachboy, that means when he liegt in bed. We don't allow to stand up with a behula. Push it's nicht gesinnt. So he needs to be in the bed a few minutes. If a Schachboy, when man weckt him auf, and weckt sich weg auf, demmelt sich Jaidele von am Yeshivos. You shall think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Melech Malcha, am Luchem HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing. Wer kann noch schlufen? Wie ist es schach zu schlufen? Es am Eile kommt aus, dass Shechanurach HaRav geht am moiridige Eize, to stand up in the morning and to start the day. When you start the day with such a big simcha, that the Melech Malcha am Luchem HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs in der Avoide, there is no stärkere Mr. Cipher. And he's saying more, that when you say Moida Anile Vernegel Melech Chai V'Kayam, that is the word soll doch der Mannen an der Eibische Stadt leben hier. Moire die Gewerte, man seht es zwischen keinem. Und du sind der Push der Pschattlich heute von dem Ramu. But the Ramu is meshan a little bit illusion. Es liegt in dem Auge that that when you likes the Charup, aber dann ein Kide du, das ist genug geraft, alle Mitte soll teure, noch mehr, ist ein Chiddisch in Haluch, gesungen Haluch, etwas Haluch, was steht nicht genug geraft, eine moire die Sache, wo keiner bringt auch nicht. It passkent la Haluch, that you need to give money for somebody soll dich aufwecken. There's no such a Pesach. Keiner bringt nicht den Pesach. Von wie baut dann Pesach? That we are seeing that Rebbe Kiva had 3 things when he was in the way. A tarnagel, mit a lech, mit a chamor. Imagine you're taking a tarnagel with you in the whole way. Ich meine, die schwerste Sache, a chamor kann man noch nehmen, befraten. Was nimmst du a tarnagel? Man darf ihn halten in der Rahmen. because he needs somebody to wake you. You're putting a clock. It costs a few money. Why I need to rent somebody to wake you up? But the clock, you can make snooze. Get a Quetschemknäppel. It's never a Tannegel. I was one day sleeping in a dorf in the morning. The old Tannegel, you can't sleep back. You need to stand up. Rabbi soll helfen mir stand up, da kann man sich aufwecken. Und man soll sich keine changen. Und Rabbi soll helfen, da kann dem sich ist Nase, wenn nicht mehr will killen, wie es ja hat. Nase, wenn nicht mehr Amerika Echat mit Messias Nefesh. Also wie Echat, man sagt schon mal, es ruhig, aber keine Schem Echat. Und der Rabbi soll helfen. Also schon sagen, Kibbutz Nitcha Yisruel, das ist noch ein Tam, wo es mir erst Chulav. Weil mit der Mantel die ganze Zeit Zuwas, Chula, wird wasch. Das weiß nicht der Eulam, der Lucha, Chak Yankov and other, that you need to eat the wash also. Not only Rosh Hashanah, it's the Rosh Hashanah for Rochnias. There is Rosh Hashanah Lechasidus, Rosh Hashanah Legashmias, Shavuos is Rosh Hashanah of Rochnias. So you need to make the wash. So zana shunu toivu im Siku, mit all vielen dem Kirvas Elekim li toiv, mit Azizkeit kann dienen, mit all Gita Spurs, Barachnes über Gashmes, mit schon solche Sachen bekurev, zum Eire, Zubas, Chula, mit Wasch, mit Bies Mashiach, zit Kaini, beim Heire, bei Yamaini, Umain.
Shaya, for Divrei Torah, Divrei Eiros. I was reminded actually of for bringing the Rebbe. The Rebbe writes that people write to me and complain to me that nowadays there's no more open nisim, there's no more neflayis. So the Rebbe writes in the Farbrengen that it says in Shulchan Aruch that the Eibishter is found in every single person's room in the morning. And this is the Eibishter is found right there. Atzmahos, Hashem has a lot to do. And nevertheless, the Eibishter takes time to be in your room in the morning. That's the biggest mess that could be. For the next speaker, I'd like to call up the Rav Bavitch Vanash of Melbourne, Rabbi Zirkind.
Just one comment on what the Rosh Yeshiva mentioned about the Bechiras Chametz. So he mentioned that it was being Bechir al Tnai. So I just want to understand, just as a Shaya. So l'chora, if you go to the Omar that says that you go boss to the person, so if a person is in Eretz Yisrael, so then lagabe him, you can't hear what? This will be going on for the next half an hour. The Rosh Yeshiva mentioned about the Bechir al Tnai. So l'chura, there's a Shaila, the Rosh Yeshiva, that Memonavshach, if you go Laman Da'omar that says you go to Basa de Gavra, so if he's in Eretz Yisrael, and he's selling his chametz in Eretz Yisrael, and in the Chutz Loretz, let's say in America, so as soon as it comes this man Issa for him, so then B'derech Mamela, the chametz can't be sold in Chutz Loretz. He doesn't need it tonight, it's B'derech Mamela, not his to sell. So if you hold like the person goes boss to the Mokim, so it's still his chametz, he could sell it. And the chametz he sold in Eretz Yisrael, that chametz is not his either to sell, because it's not for the Rav there to sell. So each day will cancel each other out. You don't even need the Mechir out tonight. That itself takes care of the issue. It's the fact that it's whether it's the Rav's in his location to sell or not. After yes, I'm saying those two shittas maybe an afgeminute. Akopanim. It's a bit late, so I don't know how much time I have to discuss the sugya. It's not a sugya necessarily related to Pesach or to Shavuos, but Shavuos we were given Kol HaTeira Kula, so we could talk a little bit about any mitzvah, any chiyuv. I want to discuss a bit about the geder of schiras batim. If someone rents a house, when does the chiyuv of mezuzah start? And this has many nafkaminas lahalacha, not just about a mechiras bayis, but if let's say you get a hotel room, when do you have to put on a mezuzah? If you have to put on a mezuzah if you rent a hotel room, If you're Rahman al-Slan, a person is in a hospital and they're going to be there for a while, is there a chiyuv mezuzah? So mistama, we don't have time to go through all of these gedarim or these halacha l'maisa, but at least durchreit in a bit the sugya to try to make some sense of the sugya. And kemuvan, we know that by the Rebbe writes that when you move into a house, you should put up a mezuzah right away, and that's more al pi pnimis yanyanim. But I mean, there's others that write it al pi halacha also, but al kopanim, that's the way mefirsach. But at least to discuss the sugya a bit. So we'll start with the sugya in Menachos Daf Mem Daled. So although most of Menachos is talking about kachim, we have in Perikat Cheles, you have a whole discussion about tefillin, mezuzos, a bissel von tzitzis, v'chulu. So the Gemara here says, Amar Rav Yehuda, talis she'ula kol shleishim yom pturim min hatzitzis. That if you have a borrowed talis, if you borrow someone's garment, so for 30 days, you're potter from putting on tzitzis. That means the beged doesn't have tzitzis, but it's mechuyev b'tzitzis. It's a garment that has 4 corners. So the first 30 days, it's potter min hatzitzis, mekan ve'ela chayeves. After the 30 days, you're chayev. The Gemara brings a raya, Tani Namahochi, he brings a braisa to support Rav Yehuda, who's an Amoira, Hador, Pundaki, Beretz Yisrael, someone who's living in an inn in Eretz Yisrael, V'hasoicher Bais V'chutz Loretz, and someone who is renting a house in Chutz Loretz, Kol Shleishim Yom Potem and Azuzah, first 30 days he's Potem and Azuzah, V'kam Ve'ele Chayiv. Next, afterwards he's Chayiv. But if you rent a house in Eretz Yisrael, you put up a mezuzah right away. Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. This is the Gemara. What's obvious right away from the Gemara is the Gemara compares the dinim of talis to the dinim of mezuzah. This is not the only place the Gemara makes such a comparison. There's other Gemaras and kama v'kama halachas that compare the two. But bashkof rishayna, at first glance, the question is, on what basis are we comparing the two halachas? What's the comparison to a talis to the dinim of mezuzah? So l'chura, both of them have together of you have an entity. A talis is a metaltalin, it's a garment. A bayis is a house. So you have something that's karka and something metaltalin, but both of them, there is a din that it requires there's a chesaron in that, l'chura b'pashtus is a chesaron in that guf hadavar, in that thing itself, until you're mashlam it, until you complete it by either putting on a mezuzah or by putting on tzitzis. Labdafke, that's the pshat l'peil mamish, but at least that's the hashkafa rishayna. And what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says in both cases that after 30 days you have a chiyuv, before 30 days you don't have a chiyuv. So Tosfos over here right away points out, Tosfos says, Talis she'ula kol lamed yom, he says that what's the source for this idea? What's the gather of this? So he brings the Gemara in Chulin. The Gemara in Chulin says that we learn out by certain dinim, there's a whole discussion about certain dinim that the Torah uses a lashon yachid, a singular lashon, tzeincha, etc. So from there we learn out dafki yours and not from other people. So likewise, the Torah says ksuscha when it comes to tzitzis. It says ksuscha, your garment, yours, and not shalachayim. So something that's not yours, you have no chiyuv to put on tzitzis. So Memela comes out, according to Tosfos Mefurish, the chiyuv of putting on tzitzis after 30 days is not a din deiraisa, it's a din de Rabbonim, because the Torah clearly says ksuscha. Ksuscha it undoes, or there's no chiyuv on taking someone else's garment and putting on tzitzis. That's the way it's brought halacha l'maisa in Shulchan Aruch in Simin Yud Daled. What's interesting is that it doesn't discuss what happens if someone rents someone's talis. Someone's paying money. You go sometimes to a store, you go to these types of various stores, and so on, you could rent a garment. What's the din of schidus talis? It doesn't mention it here. It's comparing she'ila, borrowing, to the dinim of schidus batim. Then Tosfos says, l'chura, based on that svara, you would say that the same thing is Lagabi Mezuzah. The Torah says Beisecha, right? Mezuzah is Beisecha, so it has to be on your bias. So Kolzman, it's on your bias. Kolzman has to be Beisecha. It means Beisecha Lashon Yachid. Or as the Lashon HaGemara in Yom and Sukkah is Hamiyuchad Lach. That has to be yours. So l'chura, you would think, therefore, that's the same svara. Therefore, Midei there's no chiyuv at all. It's not your house. Even if you're seicheres abayis, even if you rent a house, it's still not yours. And therefore, it's pater. Taisa says, no. Taisa's first sad, Taisa says, no, you're not, the diuk of Beisecha does not apply to mezuzah because the Gemara has another drasha. Kedama Rabba or Rava, the various girsus in different places in Shas, it's quoted in a few mesechtas, that Beisecha derech biyascha, that the chiyuv of putting on the mezuzah is the way you enter the house. So the darasha of Beisecha is not coming to limit whose house it has to be, but where you put the mezuzah on. That's Pashup Pshat in the Gemara. The Mela comes out that there's no limitation of Beisecha to being yours. It could be even Bishal HaChedim, it could be even someone else's house, and therefore there'll be a chiyuv d'oraisa. So right away the question is, so what's the difference 30 days? Why 30 days makes a difference? If it's yours, it's yours. Or if it's not yours, it makes no difference if it's yours. It doesn't have to be yours. What's the chiluk 30 days or not? So Taisva says over here, the reason why, he says, because miu kol lamed yoim pater de lav beis dira di dehu. For 30 days, it's not his beis dira. What's pshat? For 30 days, it's not his beis dira. So the Gemara tells us in Masechtas Sukkah, the Gemara tells us in Masechtas Yuma, that the geder of the chiyuv, the obligation to put a mezuzah on a house, is totally in whether it's your beis dira. Do you live there? The dairi be'inshi, the Gemara says, that people live there, and there's certain shiurim. It has to be a dalad al dalad. It has to be 4 amas on 4 amas, etc. It has to be a bais kavua v'chulu. So l'chora, Kol Zman Taisus is saying it's not yet 30 days into the rent, into the lease. Haste not your bias, and therefore there's no chiyuv. But after 30 days, this chiyuv begins, but midayraisa, and therefore you have to put on a mezuzah then. Taisus l'chura. So the question is, where do you find such a dimion to such an idea that for 30 days it's not yours and then it becomes yours after 30 days? If I rent something, as soon as I pay the money for it, l'chura, it's mine. What's the 30 days have to do with anything? So Taisvus brings a raya, he says, l'chura, it's doima to a Gemara in Baba Basra. The Gemara in Baba Basra, Daf Ches, and Sanhedrin, Daf Kuf Yud Beis, the Gemara there says, it's l'gabe when you could start collecting from people in the town. The halacha is that everybody has to contribute to the various different collections for the lefarnes, to support the poor people in the town. So the Gemara discusses at what point is a person considered Anshe Ha'ir in order for him to be obligated in the collection. So the Gemara says that whoever is in a city for 30 days, he becomes Ka'anshe Ha'ir. He becomes like the people in the city, and therefore he's Chayiv already in the Tamchoy V'chulu. So Taisus wants to bring a raya from there, and Taisus wants to say, oh, here you have a mocker to this idea of 30 days. Now, Al Pi Pashtus Ma'adimyan. Why? Because the chiyuv of mezuzah on a person's bias is totally in the person's house. What does that have to do with Anshe Ha'ir? In other words, the Gemara there is discussing at what point could the other people in town see this newcomer as part of the city. So therefore, he has a chiyuv la'chedim. So then you say that it starts after 30 days. Till then, he says, you know what, I'm not here. But that's a din in the other people. But a mezuzah has to do with you. What's the connection with other people? What has to do with anshe? Why is that a chiluk? It takes 30 days for other people to get used to you. It takes 30 days for other people to consider you as part of the city. But why is that a stira? Or in which way does it take away from my bias if it's not dira dira? Why is it not my dira? It's not your bias. He says it's not your dira. And l'chora, even more so, this is a chiddush gomer. Where do you find such a gather? The Gemara Masechtas Sukkah, the Gemara Masechtas Yuma clearly tell us what's the hagdara of what is the chiyuv mezuzah. The chiyuv mezuzah is a bias, a beis keva, that it has to have an established, right? The Gemara is machalak between a sukkah, which is a beis arai, versus a regular house that has a strong binyan, is a strong structure. So then l'chora the chiyuv starts. Why? Because it's a royal dita, you could sleep there, you could eat there. And even a base teven, according to some Rishonim, even if you have a house that is usually used for, for other things, and you don't sleep there, but since it's royal, it'll have a chiyuv mezuzah. Since when do you have this geder that has to be mechsi, that it is kedidei and not didei? It's totally about the anshe ir. This seems to be a whole new geder l'chora that you don't find in hilchos mezuzah. Tosfos then Bechlal rejects this whole approach, and Tosfos says that the whole din of after 30 days is only the Rabbonim. Why? Today, Beisach Oksivi. The Torah says it twice. We have in Parshas Ve'eschanun, right? The Torah says once in Behafta, Parsha Ve'hafta, and then you have again in V'hoyim Shemai. It says twice Beisach, so you have twice. So you have a klal in the Gemara. Anytime it has twice the same drasha, the same word, one is l'drasha for this, and one is l'drasha achriti. So you still have Beisach to be memayit. It has to be Beischa, not Beis Shalachedim. Okay, so this is sort of the beginning of the discussion. Tosfos here leaves off with two opinions about whether or not the chiyuv of a mezuzah on a bayis that you rent is a chiyuv de'iraisa or a chiyuv de'rabbanan after the 30 days. He doesn't change in the second approach what's the difference of the 30 days. Is not masbir here what's the difference of 30 days. He seems to still hold with the same first approach. It's not by beis dida didei. It's not his beis dida. Nor the difference is, even after 30 days, is the chiyuv min HaTorah, the chiyuv midrabanan. However, Tosfos in Mesechtes Avodah Zarah, Tosfos gives a different beer. Mesechtes Avodah Zarah, Tosfos there on Daf Chaf Aleph, the Gemara there says as follows. This is the Gemara Mesechtes Avodah Zarah and the Gemara Mesechtes Psachim Daf Dalet, for those of you in the Yeshivos system. The Gemara discusses over here mitzad the dinim of giving karka to a goy in Eretz Yisrael. Mishnah says ein maskinin lembotim beretz Yisrael, etc. And the nafkamina is lagabe dinim of the mitzvahs that are totally in Eretz Yisrael, etc. And whether there's an isser chaniyas karka to give them land in Eretz Yisrael without getting into the pratim zanegeh. But the Gemara there says, the Gemara has a svara to say that maybe the problem is the kamafkala memezuzah. Giving it to a guy, it's going to remove the chiyuv mezuzah. Amar Rav Mesharshia mezuzah chayves hadaru. It's not a chiyuv on the bayis, it's a chiyuv on the person living in the house. It's a klal. The Gemara says it here, the Gemara says it again as we said in Psachim, the Gemara says it earlier in the Masechta. It's a chayves hadar. So what comes out of here? What comes out over here is the chiyuv is not a chiyuv on the bayis. It's not a chiyuv on the house. It's not totally on whose house it is necessarily. It's a totally on the person living in the house. That's pshat beis dira, your house where you live in. Akopanim. Tosfos then gets into an interesting discussion about the nature of yesh kinyan or ein kinyan, the Gemara in Gittin, whether there is a kinyan or no kinyan to a goy in Eretz Yisrael, afkiya, etc. And then Tosfos says, at the end of the Tosfos, he says that what happens if a yid rents out his house to a goy? So he says there was no chiyuv min HaTorah because the yid is not living there; it's not his house. And even if another yid rents it, he brings the Gemara. Now we have it menachos, and he says mikol mokem ein chiyuv ze min HaTorah de mederaisa p'tura liyolam. Min HaTorah it's always pater chsiv beisecha v'lo yishal achedim. And then he brings today beisecha ksivi. It looks like it's his. Just like a borrowed talis, right? The dimin the Gemara brings the whole lamed yom pturim and tzitzis. The first 30 days it's parted from the tzitzis. For what din? So Tosfos says, you want to know the comparison to a talis, a borrowed talis, and a house, that they're both don't look like the person until 30. Doesn't look like it's his until 30 days. What's the hasbara of that? So Tosfos in Mesechtes Chulin Daf Kuf Yud, the Gemara there also has a one-liner. It's an interesting story without getting into the pratim. And Tosfos there says that what's the pshat? He says because usually if someone borrows something, okay, maybe it's borrowed, it's not yours. After 30 days, stam shi'ila lamed yoim, we assume that only lends something for 30 days. So post 30 days, it's not usual. So now the person is still wearing it past 30 days. Aha, must be it belongs to him. So since it looks like his, with the Rabbonim, they said you're chayiv to put on tzitzis because it looks like yours. Because people are going to think it's yours, and you're walking around without tzitzis, so they can be malamed till 30 days. Post 30 days, they can't be malamed. It's not Pashas doesn't work. So Taisa says the same thing as Chidas Batim. You rent a house, 30 days, people don't think it's yours. Wild idea. After 30 days, now we know it's yours. What's the Svara? There's no cloud that Sam Chidas Lamed Yom. There's no such a gedder that a Chidas is for 30 days. The Gemara talks about Chidas as a gedder of Yom. Schidas lo yoimi. But schidas lo lamed yoim, where do you find such a gedder? So what's the dimin? Why are you comparing the two cases? They have no dimin whatsoever. The chiyuv of talis I can understand. It's not, that's the mitzias, there's the way people see. But mitzad the schidas batim, what happens if I rent a house for 6 months? Everybody could rent a house for a very long time. You mean to tell me that till past 30 days people think it's not mine? Not mine, after 30 days people think it's mine. How does that work? So this is some of the problems that we have with the mahalach that Tosfos has. B'kitzur, according to the first tzad he has, which is that it's deiraisa, he's going to explain lav dira didehu. It's not his house. Why not? Because there's a Gemara about tzedakah. And even if, and after 30 days, it's deiraisa. And if Rabbonim nidas kishalei, it looks like it's his. But from both ends, l'chora, the Shaya doesn't really make sense about what's going on over here. So let's maybe go into this a bit for a minute. Trying to navigate what to say and what not to say. So let's discuss first of all for a minute the gedder of schidus. Ask a pashta shayla. Tosfos is making an argument according to the second side that it's not your house. It's not your house. But according to the first side, it is your house. Which one is it? Is it your house or it's not your house? What changed? What's the difference between the first answer and the second answer of Tosfos? First answer, minat Torah, it's your house, right? I'm sorry, forget that. According to the first answer of Tosfos is learning that we don't have the miyut beisachad that it has to dafka be your house, even if it's not your house, even if it's beisach shalachedim, you're still chayv minat Torah. But according to the second answer, because we have beisachad, that means that it needs to be your house. And Tosfos is saying that the schidus doesn't make it your house. Why not? Why doesn't the schidus make it your house? If I go into someone's house, if I rent someone's house, and there's chametz in the house, and I have the maftech, the mesidas maftech, I get the key before Yom Yudalid Belayla. Whose chiyuv is it to get rid of the chametz? It's Allah Soicher. The Gemara Mufareshes, Halacha Mufareshes, Siman Tov Lamed Zayin Shulchan Aruch. What do you mean? It's not my house. I'm koine the chametz. As soon as I come into the house, I'm koine behefker, whatever the get it is. Koine. Taki have a machlokes, Rambam and Ravid and Mordechai Mishpa, the whole discussion about things that are left in the house from the previous owner, whether the soicher is koine them versus things that come alma, let's say by the field, and you have the zevel, v'chulu. Taki negeya. But what's the klal over here? So, just to entertain the idea for a minute, there's a sugya in a few places, in Psachim, in Avodah Zarah, in Bav Metzia. The Gemara has a discussion whether schidus kanya, schidus loy kanya. What's the get of schidus kanya, schidus loy kanya? But pashtus, if I rent something, does that house become mine? Right? So we may be familiar with a klal or machlokes in the Gemara and Baba Basra, Daf Kuf Lamed Vav, and elsewhere in Shas, machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan, discussion over there, if someone buys a field lapedus, whether he could be do the mitzvah of bikurim. Could it be kaida? Could he read that this is his field v'chulu? So the shayla says, kinin hapedus ke kinin haguf. Do I say when I purchase something to have usage of the item, does that make it my item? Right? Kinin hapedus ke kinin haguf. So l'chora, what's pshat schiras kanya, schiras loikanya? I'm renting something. Now, the physical property doesn't belong to me. The physical property belongs to the owner. So what's the gedder of my ownership on this land? What's the gedder of my ownership, right? So if I say schiras kanya, I own it. It's mine. L'chora b'pashtus, it's fully mine. The masket, the renter, it's his house. Okay, there's a gedder, obviously there's a bailus, there's a gedder of bailus, but in all other terms, it's mine. Lagabi Yeschivos and v'chulu will be my Yeschivos. That means even beguf hadover, I could argue that it's mine. Schiras loikanya argues, no. What do I have? I have the right to be in the house. I have the right to use the house. I don't have any rights of the house itself. One of the major nafkaminis is the Gemara in Erchen Daf Chaf Aleph. The Gemara there discusses about someone who rents a house and then is makdish the house, right? He makes it hektish. So now the soicher is not allowed to live in the house because it's being moyel mahektish. I rented it; it's my house. How could you then go ahead and be makdish it? So obviously, this maskir still has the kinin guf versus the kinin apedis. So this is a discussion. The Gemara discusses this again, as we mentioned before in a few places, and the Gemara seems to come to the conclusion that what schiras loikanya, that schiras is not koina, right? However, there's a Gemara in Bab Metzia, as mentioned before Daf Nun Vav. The Gemara there speaks about schiras loyemi mecherhu, that when I rent something, even for a day, it's considered like a mechira. So for there's a stira between these two Gemaras. Is it mine or is it not mine? So Taisus there in Bab Metzia, Daf Nun Vav Beis, Taisus learns that the mechira, that this din of the Gemara Bab Metzia is talking about the din of oino. So regarding oino, of overcharging, so there we could say that the schiras has a din of mechira legabi oino, that you can't overcharge, so to speak. You could have a limitation, like by metalplin of oino, but by karaka you don't have a din of an overcharge of oino. So legabi mechira, the legabi schiras will have the same gedder. So according to Taisus, schiras lekanya klal, and there's an exception by oino, there's a gedder azay. But many other rishonim don't learn that way, and many other rishonim learn that there's a chiluk between schiras loikanya legabi the guf hadover versus schiras kanya legabi the hishtamshus, which means, in other words, that you have the right to use the place. Schiras loikanya, because we're going to say you don't have the actual house, you don't own the house, but schiras kanya in the sense that you have the rights to use the place. You have rights to use the place. And that's l'choreh b'pashtus, the chiluk between these two Gemaras. There's many rayos to discuss this in Choshen Mishpat, Simin Shin Yud Beis, and other places where you have this dinim. We don't have time to get into it. It is interesting to note, the Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Shabbos, in Kuntes Achrin, in two places, we say schiras lekanya bein lekula bein lechumra. Right? He says in the Reish Mem Vav, and he says it in Shin Samach Vav as well. But then he says in Shin Pei that there's a day that says schiras leyemi mecherhu. Right? So which one is it? The answer is b'pashas lagabe edavin, lagabe this din about if his own is in someone else's house, he rents his house, whether he's considered like he owns it, so therefore you have to do edav chatzedis. So there, he has rights to the place. He definitely has a shtamshus to the place, and that's b'pashas loyil mechalek, and the Tzemach Tzedek in the Chidushim discusses ba'arichas in the end over there in the Chidushim of the Tzemach Tzedek. Why is this all in the Geya? Because you could b'pashtus then say that's what Taisus is saying over here. Schiras loikanya. He doesn't own it, and not only he doesn't own it, but even legabi the gedder hishtamshus is not a gedder of a kinyan that he has on it. So if he has no kinyan, it's not beischa. According to the second answer of Tosfos, beischa needs to be your house. This is not your house, so therefore you're not chayiv in mezuzah and after only yechiv the Rabbonim. Okay, the 30 days though hasn't been explained. The Beis Yosef brings in Hilchos Mezuzah and Simereish Peivov. He brings a Rabbeinu Menoyach. And Rabbeinu Menoyach there says an interesting svara. He says that till 30 days, it's a diras aray. Pelo otzum. For 30 days, it's not considered his dira, it's a diras aray. But Pashtus, he's learning that'll be a deiraisa. So if it's min ha-Torah, l'chorah, he has a chiyuv right away. What's the 30 days? It gets involved. So he's saying, no, it's a diras aray. What's pshat? It's a diras aray. That there's somehow there's something lacking in his kfiyus in the house. That 30 days, So you could say he's learning like Tosfos. In the first answer, lav dira didehu. It's not considered his dira, so therefore it has a din of diras aray. But as we said before, first of all, Tosfos' answer itself is shver, because that's not the way the Gemara learns pshat. That's not the geder of roy l'dira doesn't have to be that you're living in it for 30 days. That's not the geder. Since when do you have such a geder? And that should be not just by schiras, it should be even by bechira gomer, even if you bought the house. What makes it pikvius? Because you bought it. It's nothing to do with the kinyan. So then what's it to do with 30 days? Right? Not only that, the Gemara talks about sukkahs hachag b'chag. Is there chayiv and mezuzah on your sukkah? So the Gemara gets into the whole discussion. Is it considered beis dira? Is it considered beis aray or not? 7 days of beis aray, because it's a week. It's not built properly. But a regular house, right away, it's chayiv. Who cares about where do you have this? This is a mechudish dik pshat. The Rabbeinu Menoyach is a very mechudish dik pshat. That's what Rabbeinu Menoyach says. Diras aray, very modern. The Shach says in one line over there. The Shach uses a lashon. He says that. He brings the first answer of Tosfos. Right away, the Rabbi Kiva Eger jumps on him and he says, "This is Ladeya, that it's Midairaisa. We don't paskin this Minat Torah. Why is the Shach paskin like that? Why is he bringing this svara?" And as we ask, L'chura, if it's Minat Torah Taka, then the Chiyuv should start right away. What's the 30 days or not the 30 days? So. How much time do I have? All right, we'll skip a bit. We'll just try to get one thing across here. Rashi says something different over here. Rashi in Mesachtas Menachos, Rashi says, why is the Seicher Bayis Potter? He says, Shema Yachser Boy. Shema Yachser Boy. He may be Chayzer, a pashtus in the rental. He may back out. What is Rashi saying? Mashein came in Eretz Yisrael, Mishum Yishav Eretz Yisrael, the La'achar Shekava Shuv Ein Noitla Misham. After he already fastened the mezuzah, he's not going to take it away. Afilu Yitzman, even if he leaves, because he brings the Gemara Bal Metzia, that you're not allowed to leave your house taking your mezuzahs v'chulu. What's the difference? So maybe he's learning in Eretz Yisrael, you're not going to take the mezuzahs. In Chutz La'aretz you would. It's not frustrating Rashi's in that pshat. But Rashi's giving a little bit more oisius. He's saying is, the issue is pasha kipshute. You're going to put the mezuzah on the house, and then it's going to come a week, 2 weeks later, you're going to say, I don't want to live in the house, I want to be chayzed on the zechirus. So therefore, he may take away the mezuzah. So what's the chesaron? What did he do wrong? What's the problem? See, Rashi in Avodah Zarah when Rashi discusses the geder of the chiyuv of bar choyves hadar, Rashi says v'loy choyves habayis. It's not the chiyuv on the house. Hilkach leka. Afkatata, b'chsiv beisecha v'derech b'yascha alma l'mish nichnas v'yotze l'soicha as herachmana. A whole new pshat. Rashi says that what's the geder of derech b'yascha? The Torah says beischa derech b'yascha. You know what that means? Those who could come in and out of the house. That's where the Torah says you have a chiyuv to put on a mezuzah. So what is Rashi saying? The pashtus. If you have reshus to go in and out of the house, you have a chiyuv. Minat Torah. You don't have to own the house. Doesn't say it has to be Beisach or live, right? He's not learning like the second answer of Tosfos with Pashtus. He's learning like the first answer of Tosfos, that there's no chesaron in it being Beischa and not Shalach. It could be anybody's house. You have the right to enter in and out of the house. Chayves Hadar, you have a chiyuv. Lahoyer, the Magen Avraham has a svara in Siman Yotes. The Magen Avraham says that when you put a mezuzah on the house and you're not living in the house yet, don't make the bracha, because you're not chayiv. You're only going to be chayiv when you're actually living in the house. Ad Kedei Kach, Rabbi Kiva Eger has a svara in Siman Yotes, Shuvates. He says over there, maybe every time you leave your house to go to work and you come back, you should make a new bracha, because you don't have a chiyuv. Right? The chiyuv is not on the bayis. It's not a chiyuv on the bayis. The mezuzah is not the chiyuv is not on the mezuzah. It's not on the house. The chiyuv is on you. And you could come in and out. Okay, so you need to put a mezuzah. which b'derech agav could answer a big shaila. I'm not going to spend too much time. I'm just going to try to rush this up. A big shaila. We know there's a din of zek keli vanveyo, right? Gemara says, Masechta Shabbos, I think it's Kuf Lamed Aleph, Kuf Lamed Beis, the Gemara there says that you have a chiyuv to make mitzvahs beautiful. And the Gemara gives us some examples, right? A Sefer Torah, a nice Sefer Torah. It should also be, what else does the Gemara there say? Mezuzah, tzitzis, no, the Gemara says, Rashi, Masechtas Baba Kama, when the Gemara in Daf Tes talks about Hider Mitzvah Shlish, Rashi adds talis no, a beautiful talis. You heard of such a thing? What's the chiyuv on the talis? Why does your talis no have to be a nice talis? So let me ask you a question. According to Rashi, do you have to have a nice house in order to put on mezuzah? Maybe we have to spend $5 million on a house because it has to be zeh keli vanveyo. What's the difference? What's the chiluk? Because lagabi the pashtus, you could say, because lagabi the talis, even if you paskin that the chayv is gavra, it's not chayv is mana, which we nem on both ways. There's still a gedder that it's a chiyuv in the gedder of the talis. The beged itself, we find dinam lagabi Shabbos that the noi beged is totally in the tzitzis v'chulu v'chulu v'chulu. There's still a gedder of the beged, and you can't really have the mitzvah without the beged. The chiyuv is on the beged. When does the chiyuv start? When you put it on, fine. But the chiyuv is on the beged. Versus mezuzah, the chiyuv is not on the bias. Klal u'klal. The chiyuv is on the person. You come in, you put it on. You come out, you take it off. Versus your tzitzis, you don't take it on and take it off every time you're wearing it. So now, comes back to this Rashi. Rashi says, what is Rashi learning? He's bepashas learning like the first answer of Tosfos. So what's the svara over here? So Rashi is clear, you don't have to have any kinyan, the bias doesn't have to belong to you. You have to have ishtamshus. What type of ishtamshus? You could be yetzer and nichnas. Rashi learns, b'pashtus, that the chiv is deiraisa. So what's the 30 days? L'chura, the 30 days is the Rabbonim de Gezach. Minat Torah, you have a chiv to put on the mezuzah right away. That's what you're going to understand. No, but then, Shema Yachzir is a din Rabbonim, and the Chazal were concerned that what? If you put on the mezuzah, you may come to take it off, and then what? Every moment you're living in it, you have a chiyuv, right? Have a nichnas v'yetz every single second, right? So there's a shtickle here we have to get to, which we don't have time to understand, that the gedder of Lamed Yoim, lagabi certain dinim, you have. There's called a chazaka of ishtamshus b'metaltalin. Usually, chazaka is gimel shanim. By metaltalin, there's another gedder, and that's one side of the coin we have to get to. And then there's other nekudis lagabe. You could be chayzer within the shloshim yom. But we'll skip that point just for now. But l'chora Rashi is saying like this. Rashi is saying is that a person when he's soicher abayis, in his mind, there's no shleimus yet to the schiras. The schiras doesn't have a complete schiras. Why? Because there's a machlokes in the Gemara whether schiras mishtalemes mitchila v'atzof or ein mishtalemes ela b'sof. When do you have a chayvus to pay for the schiras? If the chayvus only comes at the end, essentially what you're saying is it's not every second I'm paying. It's mine. It's only at the end that I completed the term is mine. So if Shema Yachzir B'y comes out retroactively, it's not just. In other words, it's not just that Rashi says you should have to have ishtamshus, but in order to make it ishtamshus, it still has to be considered ishtamshus of your house. But if you could back out, comes out retroactively, lav davka hastis a beis dira. That means even if Rashi is going to learn and he's going to say that taka, it just has to be nichnas v'yotza, but it still has to be a mokim dira. It has to be dira didei. Rashi is going to agree with that svara. So since it has to be dira didei, but the gedder of dira didei is because you could say retroactively it wasn't my dira. Hastis, when I put on the mezuzah, what's the problem? L'chura, I put on a mezuzah, I was kavei mezuzah bebracha, and I made a bracha about. That's what Pashas Rashi is going to say. There's more to add to this, but to leave it bekitzer here, the final nakuda is there's a big difference between Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says it has to be what the person thinks. Tosfos says it has to be what other people think. One nafkamina. The Avnei Nezer has a tshuva we discusses. What if you're in a beis chaylim, a person's going to be in a hospital for a number of months? So he wants to say that since according to Tosfos it has to do with people think. V'chulu v'chulu. He says no one thinks that it's your house, right? That's what he says. Well, according to Rashi, Yeshleimat, it really depends how the person sees it for himself, right? It's not negate what other people think, because for him it has to do with whether he thinks that he could back out of the deal or not. So So l'chora, for that svara alone, it makes no difference whether other people think he's living in the house. It has to do with what he thinks that he's living in the house. There could be an afkamina. One of the things that Beis Dida, according to the Midiraisa, because there the Avnei Nezer says that if you hold it's Menat Torah, you'll still be mechuyev right away. But if you learn like Rashi's svara that the Chazal made a gzeira, so then you would say that even in Beis Chaylim you wouldn't have a chiyuv right away. I'm mekatzer very much over here to save time for other people. Yagdol Torah v'yadid.
For the next speaker, I'd like to call up a member of Melbourne Beis Din and Chaver Kale Mr. Talmud, Rabbi Berman.
Shus Rosh Yeshiva, Choshev Talmid Chachamim, Abachrim. It's a big schus to be able to speak here today. I wanted to speak about a common shaila in Choshen Mishpat in Hilchos Nezikin. Someone is mazik, the marshal, a car. He makes a bump, a scratch on the car, and the car already has a number of scratches on it. So if we look at mitzad the pchas of the car, there's no pchas, there's no depreciation in value on the car, machmas that scratch. But mitzad sheni, the tikkun of the scratch is going to cost quite a bit of money. So what is the choivas nezek on the mazik? Is he mechuyev to pay for the hefsed, for the pchas, or he's mechuyev to pay for the nezek? Is it a choiva to be replace the item, or is it a choiva just to be compensate for the hefsed? This shayla also comes out if a person's mazik, let's say the wall of someone's house. So mitzad the depreciation of the house, there's no depreciation. The house is worth the same amount of money. But mitzad the tikkun, there's it's going to cost maybe a lot of money, the tikkun of the house. So what is the choivas tashlum of nezek mutal on the mazik? So we're going to be mekatze a bit. You do a shaila, ma'aseh shahaya in brisk, Mizman Reb Chaim, a person had 2 rare svarim, each one was worth 500 rubles, and someone was mazik one of the svarim, and as a result of the nezek on that sefer, the remaining sefer became even more rare and went up to 1,000 rubles in its value. So Sachakol, there was no nezek, no hefsed. But the Maisa, he was mafsid a sefer. So Reb Chaim was done at Gufa. It's brought down in the Kisvei Yad of the Chidushei Agrach. Is Gufa Dishayla, is there a choiva to be masakin, to replace the item, or the choivas mazik to pay for the hefsed? So, and we find the poskim talk about an insured item. If you mazik someone's item and he loses the item, but he gets paid back from insurance, is there a choiva to pay him? And he had no loss because he got paid from insurance. So there's a ma'aseh machlos. The Osameach says there is a chiyuv. The HaRav Don says there's no chiyuv. Again, we're going to be mekatza. I think it's not exactly doimah to the shayla we're talking about now, because there the item itself had a clear nezek. It was mimokamacher came a hatzala. A person's as a dogma, a person's relative pays you back. That's going to part you from the nezek. Here we're talking about the item itself. The marshal, the car, the house has a clear nezek, a clear defect was caused to the item, and it's just that the saleable value hasn't changed. So we want to be done now on that. So the Ma'aseh, there's a shach. There's a shach in Hilchos Toin V'Nitten, Siman Tzaddik Hey, and the shach brings a Gemara, a well-known Gemara in Bav Metzia. The Gemara is Yudua. It talks. There's no ein nishvoi no shibud karkois. There's a ptur shvua on karka. So the Gemara asks, and it learns it from a pasuk. And the Gemara asks, why do we need a miyut for shvua on karka? Hooray! The man da omer heilech is partul. Hooray! Kol karka is heilech. Moed mixes on karka is partul. Without it, there is the cost of shibud karkois. So why do we need a miyut for karka? So the Gemara, then with the Gemara, we're talking about a case of chafa ba'boyra sichin umaris. a person did damage to the karka itself. It's not in its original state. And that's where you have, it's not heilig, and that's where I need a miut for karka that afal pikein is ein nishboy mashibu karkois. So the Rishonim there asked the kasha, hooray, sof kol sof, what's the tviyah here? If someone came and dug holes in your karka, that's a tviyas moment. You're not being tovei karka, you're being tovei the damage to the karka. That's tviyas metaltalim. It's not a karka, so hadrukush v'dukta. Why do we need a miut? How does it? The miut's not going to help us here. Otherwise, there should be a shvur ki agavna. So the Ravid, both in the Shitta and in the Yad, the Ravid says we're talking about his teviyah was not for the mois, for the hefsed of the karka. The teviyah was to be memala, to fix up the boiroi sick in the ma'aris, to actually fix the karka, a teviyah to do be memala the boiros. Other Rishonim, the Rebbeinu Yonah, the Magid Mishnah, the Ritvan, the Mukhyos, Rov Rishonim Bemes, hold that there's no such teviyah to ask him to fix up the karka. The teviyah has to be a chayvus chiv domim, and only a chiv domim is the nizik has a right to be tever from the mazik. So why is it called teviyas karka? Because it's moment which came machmas karka. That's what they say. So Pashtus, and the way the Shach learns, it's a machlokas rishonim. Is there a chayvas tikkun on the mazik? If you can be tovei him to fix up the karka, so mimela there's a chayvas tikkun. If you cannot do that, so mimela there's no chayvas tikkun. The Shach very stark paskins like the Ravid, even though seemingly it's a das yochid in the rishonim, and he's coming to svara. And he brings this down also in Shin Pei Zayin, and he says, the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch there, paskins that the chayvas nezik is to pay for the b'chas, the depreciation of the item, and Zok Fishach, he says, that's talking about dafka when it's EF shel sakein. But if it's possible to fix it, the mazik has a chayva to pay for the tikkun. And in the poskim we find also machlokas of poskim, how we paskin the, like we said, the Shach, the Nesivus, and Shin Mem, the Chazon Ish, they all paskin, there's a chayvas tikkun. Mitzad Sheni, the Tumim says the nizik cannot be mechayiv the mazik to pay for the tikkun. And the Ktsos says if a person's mashchir dirties the wall of someone's house, he says you cannot be tovei that the tikkun, it's a groma, he calls it. Merely the minig in Batei Dinim is to can be mechayiv for the tikkun, at least al koponi, if it's oimed for a tikkun. Sometimes a person just wants to cash in on the scratch on the car. He says it's a good way to make a bit of money, but has no intention to fix it up. The Maisa, if he has no intention, then he cannot be tovei that, even though the Chazon Ish is mashma, he could. But if he be'emes wants to fix it up, the Chorei Pashtus, the minig in Batei Dinim is to be mechayiv like the Shach. Just a quick, try to give a bit of a geda, a dvarim, what's the yisod of this machlokas, whether the chayvas mazik is to pay for the tikkun, to replace the item or not. We know what you do, a person, Adam is chayvel bechaveiroi, is chayev bedala dvarim, including sheves, ripui, boishes. So the Gemara says in Bava Kama that an Adam is mazik a behema, there's no chiyuv dala devarim, there's only a chiyuv nezek. So the Gemara learns out, it says ish kitei mun ba misoy, dafka ba misoy, but not ba behema. So there's no chiyuv ripui and sheves and boys, well, it's not negea, by behema. Tosfos in Gittin says huadin the Gemara is talking about a behemoth's mazik. Tosfos says huadin if an Adam is mazik a behema, there's no chiyuv dala devarim. Now tikkun pashtus is doime to ripui in its geder hadevarim. Ripui is you pay for not the long-term nezek, you're paying for fixing up the problem through a roifei. So the poskim Adan, the Nesivus, the Chazon Ish, what exactly is a geder of ripui? That's the marshal on a behema. When is it called nezek and when is it called ripui? and hudim by kli. So the Nesiva says, if to fix the item or to fix the behema requires an expense, it's not going to happen by itself, it's called nezek. If the marshal by a behema, it's going to get better by itself. Let's say it's chachash, and even it got weakened by the makkah, by the nezek, but ultimately it'll get better by itself. But even if you want to pay for a roife to make it get better quicker, sof kol sof, it's beged a ripui, and you're not mechuyev to pay. Chazon Ish is a slightly different getter. He says even if it's going to cost you money, it could be ripui. The vort is it going to go back to exactly how it was originally? Then it's called ripui. If it won't be the same as before, then it's not called ripui. He says by a kli, he says a kli, even with a tikkun, will never ever, or almost never, get back to the state it was before. And mimela, it's not beged a ripui, it's beged a nezek. It's not possible to fix a kli and bring it back to the physical state it was originally. So mimela, it cannot be called ripui. Ripui is only when it's going to naturally go back exactly to what it was. So therefore, he says it's nezek and you're mechuyev to pay. So the Chorah Pashtus, that's what the gufa on this nekuda, what the Rishonim have done. We know, everyone understands, there's no chiv ripui on a behema, on kalim. The shayla is what is the get a gufa or the ripui? Is it something you can fix? So the Moshe, the Chazon Ish has this yisod that to bring it back, you can never fix it properly like it was. After the other Rishonim mecholik on that, you can fix it. It may not be exactly the same. It's doime. That's maybe already enough to be called ripui. Maybe you're potul. Once you're potul, mitzad ripui. It's a groma, like the Katz says. Just to finish off, mi inyan le'inyan, boys the inyan, the poskim are done with a nezek on a second-hand item. Let's say a person, your mazik, a person's suit, he's got a suit, it's 2 years old, or they smashes his glasses. There's no saleable value for an old suit. It's worth nothing. $10 you could sell it for. But to the Shavuos, to the person, now here there's no tikkun, but the shayla is how much does the mazik have to pay? There's no are you mechuyev to replace it? He didn't have it wasn't worth $500 or whatever the suit's going to cost. The mitzad sheni, the value, the shavius to the person, that's what it was. So Rav Sternbach says Pashtus is totally on the same chakira. If the choivas mazik is to pay for the damages, so there wasn't really any damage. There's no he wasn't worth anything mitzad sellable value on the shuk. But if the choivas mazik is to pay for the tikkun, to replace the item, so the choiv to pay. He paskins there lemaisa that you should replace it and you deduct something for the usage it already had. Okay.
Her next speaker, I'd like to call upon the Rav of Heichal Torah, Rosh Yeshiva of Das Mesifta, HaRav Donnebaum.
Shift Rosh Yeshiva, Ma'arganim. I'd like to speak about a very negating shayla, Chosh Mishpat shayla, comes up very often. You want something from the store, and you send a chaver to the store to buy something for you. He's going to America, he can get a cheap computer. And he goes in the store and he buys a computer and they throw in something else. The guy in the store is in a good mood. Yeah, take a mouse, take something else. You go down to Kohl's and you buy coffee and there's a special on, you get something else. Who does it belong to, the extra item? Does it belong to the shaliach or does it belong to the meshaleach, which is called the Baal HaMomoin? And this shayla is actually brought down in the Gemara. The Gemara Masechtas Ksubas Arichas Amud Beis. Gemara brings the Machlokas to the Tanoim. The Kitzur Rabbi Yossi holds if it's a duvar sheyesh lo kitzvah, if it's yesh lo kitzvah, meaning something when there's an amount, you go into a store and you buy a kilo of apples, kilo of tomatoes, and he throws in an extra apple, cholkin. You divide the extra apple between the shliach and the Baal HaMomoin. If it's ein lo kitzvah, it's a chayf, it's an item which has got a value, but the guy gave you a discount. then the whole thing goes to Baal HaMamon. So for example, someone asks you to go buy a table, buy a car, it costs $1,000, $10,000, and you walk in and the guy likes you, gives you a smile and gives you a discount. The discount goes all to the Baal HaMamon. And the svara is very important. Rashi says because it's all part of the mecher. When you're buying an item, it's all, and it gives you a discount. Pshat is, it wasn't a gift to you, to the shliach. It wasn't a separate matona. It wasn't a gift. It was part of the mecher. So, lucky to the Baal HaMamon, to the Meshaleach, it all goes to him. Ma she'ein kein davar sheyesh lo kitzvo. You go to the store and you buy a sack of potatoes, kilo of tomatoes, and the guy throws in something extra. That's a matana. He gave you an extra gift. And Rashi learns, we're not sure who he gave the gift to. Did he give you the shliach because you came to the store, shkoyach? Or does he give it to the person who's got to give me the money, the Baal HaMamon? So it's a suffix, and therefore says Rashi, Cholkin. That shit is Rashi. The Rif of an art says a different reason. The reason why we say Cholkin, really it's a gift to the Meshliach. Thank you for coming to the store, it's a gift to the Shliach. Really should belong all to the Shliach. But the Shliach was nehena. Without the money, he couldn't do anything. It was only because the guy gave him the money, that's why he was able to go buy, do the purchase. So Mela, that's why he has to give part of the ravach of the matana. He has to give to the Baal HaMamon and go half. That's the shit of the Rif. Portion of Gemina is where the Moicha, the Baal HaChanus, says clearly, wow, you're a fantastic guy. Yeshiva Bocher, I love you, such a good smile. And he gives it to him, his claw is giving it to him, mafurish. So according to Rashi, he keeps it. Rashi says the Cholkin is on Mekach Sofik, but really he keeps it. According to the Rif, doesn't make a difference. The Rif says anyway, it's meant to go to the Shliach. It's only because the Shliach wouldn't have done that Shlichus without the Mamon from the Meshaleach, and therefore, even in the case Mefurish, he has to give half to the Meshaleach, even if it's Mefurish, I'm giving it to you. How do we pass on Halacha L'Maaseh? So the Ramon Shechonach Kuf Pegimel Sivov, the Ramon brings down like the Rashi. If he says Mefurish, I'm giving it to you, he keeps it, the whole thing, no Cholkin. And the Shach and the Taz and the Sivas all come screaming. This on the Shittis Rashi and the Rif and a whole long list of Rishonim all side with the Rif. And therefore the Shach and the Taz brings another good raya. We haven't got time. But the Maisa, the Achroinim seem to side with the Rif that the Cholkin is not because we're not sure. The Cholkin it belongs to the Shliach. However, the Shliach had a Noah and therefore he has to give it. We'll go through a few enough minutes, then we'll go to the most popular Shayla, which is with the mileage. I knew not so well, a very big Chosh Mishpat died, and he's not alive anymore. Maybe the first Chosh Mishpat, very serious Chosh Mishpat Koil in America, Mechon Ha'irah, Rechiel Taube. And he wrote a sefer Meishiv Halacha, and he has a moidige chap in this idea of the Cholkin. His shayla was someone, an agent selling tickets, travel agent, and he was giving a suitcase if you bought a ticket. So this guy bought a ticket for his friend, and he got a free suitcase. Who does the suitcase belong to? So l'chayra, it's the same shayla. It's the same shayla. Suitcase, tomatoes, apples, it's all the same thing, right? Pashtus. So the Chayla going to Cholkin, you go half, that's what will come out. He tainers, it depends. He's got a moidige chap. You see a gadlus from a poisek, how he can think about all sugyas and apply a sugya which doesn't seem to have any connection, but it has a connection. There's a well-known Gemara, many places in the Shas. Someone died, and he left in the backyard of Poro. And the Yoshim came after the Levaya. They came after the Shiva and they came to the estate and started, there's a poro. Dad had a poro, great. Let's make a meal, we'll make a sim, shloishim and shnayas, we'll use the poro. They shechted the poro and they had the poro, they ate the poro, and then they found out the poro belonged to somebody else. So the Gemara says that you pay shnei shlish, 2/3. Because you're nehana. You didn't want the poro. You only ate it, but you thought it was free. Had you known they belong to somebody else and you have to pay for the full value, you wouldn't have taken it. So the Gemara says you pay shnei shlish. That's what the Gemara says. So he puts this here also as well. He says that if the person who bought the ticket purchased the ticket and no interest in having a suitcase, he doesn't need a suitcase. He has plenty of suitcases. But he got a suitcase. His hanoah, his value, his shavuos in the suitcase is only 2/3 of the value. So therefore, he only has to share half of the 2/3 of the value. And that's why he wants to give 1/3. That's one nafkamina. Another nafkamina says, it's regard to good or you good. If you have a partnership in a chayfetz, so according to Rashi, it's a partnership. It's a suffix, so they're both muhzik in half, and if they want to, let's say something of value, let's say something which, a watch, a Rolex, and therefore each one wants to have the watch. So then the Gila Igid. But according to the Rif, we said it all belongs to the Shliach. The Shliach only has to buy out, has to pay out the Balamumay because he used his money to purchase, then it's his. He pays him out what he wants, but the Maisa, there's no Gediga, if he's on a shitfus, that's not enough Kamina. This Shayla comes up mostly with regard to mileage. Very common Shayla. What about mileage? Someone works for a company and he travels a lot and he gets mileage. He gets mileage from the we bought the ticket. Who owns the mileage? Does it belong to the Baal HaMomoin, the owner of the business, and after he travels at 6 or 7 times, gets a free ticket, therefore it belongs to him? Or do we say no, it belongs to the Shliach or Hafav Cholkin? How do we go to the mileage? So Rav Osner has a tshuva, and he has a chap. He doesn't really understand the shayla, he says. He says that he doesn't think this has got any shaykhs to the sugi we spoke about. Even though the other poskim, including the Moshe Baloch and other tshuvas, they all seem to connect it to the shayla about the tickets. He says, the Moshe Baloch says that if he travels a lot, it goes to the Baal HaMomoin, because it's understandable that that's what he gave. He works for the company, and therefore he's giving him tickets, even though he didn't speak out clearly that the mileage is, but we say it's ki'ilu hisnu. That's what he says. Rav Osner's got a chap, and he says that we mentioned in the Gemara there's 2 cases, right? There's a case of the matona, which is extra, and a case of the mecher. Yesh lo kitzva, ein lo kitzva. If he's going to buy a car or a chayfetz and he gets a discount, then it's all part of the mecher. It's not a matona, and therefore it all goes to the Baal HaMomoin. That's what the Gemara said. The whole Shayla, the Rif, and the Rashi is all talking about ein lo kitzva. You went to the fruit store, you bought a bag of potatoes, and he threw in a few extra potatoes. Shayla was matona. He says that the mileage is not considered an extra matana. It's a chiddush, that's what he says. It's part of the deal, part of the business. These people see that when the storekeeper throws it in, whatever his cheshbon is, he wants it to come next time, whatever, he wants it in a good mood, he throws you a matana. The mileage that you get from the airlines, it's not a matana, give me a matana. It's part of the ASIC. It's part of the mecha. They know you fly, you get the mileage, you fly again. So that's the cheshbon. It's part of the mecha, it's part of the sale. It's not an extra matana. So he says very clearly. The whole shayla and the Gemara, the whole machlokes in the Rashi, in the Rif, and the whole cheshbon, Cholkin, the whole cheshbon, this is all when it's a zaitige matana. It's a side thing, Madonna. It's a gift. He gave you a gift. He gave you extra. He gave you a mouse for your computer. He gave you an extra potato, whatever. But where it's part of the mecha, even though it's something separate, it's not the same case as the Gemara Mamish by Ein Lo Kitzvah. There you're buying a car and he gave you off a discount. But where, even though it's a separate thing, but it is a mecha, he says. It's part of the mecha. They're giving you the mileage as part of the sale of the ticket, hoping you'll come next time, you'll get more, whatever the cheshbon is. But the words in bold is, it's not a matona, as I think a matona, and that's why he says it should zicha go to the Baal HaMomoin and not to the shliach at all. Not to the guy traveling at all, even though they give it to the traveler. Because that's the way they give it. They give it to him because it's easier to have him. Who knows on the Baal HaMomoin? They don't have this guy's bank details from the... So Maila, that's what he says. We had a Shaya recently in the base in Takia about someone who's not... The Shaya in Avosna was... The common Shaya is a salesman. He travels around travels the whole world, and he goes and he travels around, and he... now, after traveling 6-7 times, he's got a free ticket. Who's got the free ticket? That's his Shaya, and he says very clearly it belongs to the Baal HaMomoin, to the proprietor, the guy paying the ticket, because it's all one big mecha. The Shaya was someone who's not traveling as a business thing. Let's say he works in a company. Let's say he's a mashgiach in a big. He's a mashgiach for OU, and part of his deal is, his contract is that he's got an old mother in Eretz Yisrael. Every year you go once or twice to Eretz Yisrael, and they pay the ticket, and he gets the mileage. Will that also go to the? So one member of the Bezin wanted to tell you that it's better. It's not the same case because it's not part of the business. It's not the the business. It's I think it's a thing that is going for his own private things, and therefore that mileage should perhaps go to the mashgiach and not to the Moshe, the OU in the example we gave. I'm more noted that if you look at Rav Osner at the way he words it, Anachanami, the Shaya there was a business, a salesman, that's true, but his yisoid is that mileage is not a matona. It's not a zayt gift. He doesn't go into details why he's traveling for the business. That's not the point. The chilik is the two things in the Gemara. Is it yesh lo kitzvah or ein lo kitzvah? Which in other words is it, are you buying an item or is it giving you a matana? That's the deciding factor. And Rav Osner says, unlike many other poskim, that the mileage is not a zayting a matana. The mileage it factors into the ticket. It's like one with the ticket. It's part of the mecha, because that's the way the airlines work out their revenue. They're not giving you free things. That's part of the cheshbon. And the meila, the choyre, if he in his diet, it will come out that even someone, the mashgiach, traveling for his own private benefit, but if the mice they're paying the ticket, mileage and ticket, according to Rav Osner, they go together, and therefore it's one mecha, and the choyre belongs to the Baal HaMomoin. One other shayla, which is also a big machlokes between the poskim, where the shliach used his own money or his own credit card to pay for the item. Does that make a difference? If you read the Gemara Poshet, there's a Baal HaMomoin and there's a shliach. So I saw in a sefer many years ago. It's called Mishpatei HaTorah, but I've seen since in other places from Rav Spitz in Eretz Yisrael. He wanted to tell you that if the shliach himself uses his own funds, his own credit card, his own funds, he's the Baal HaMomoin as well. Someone goes to the store and he buys whatever it is, a computer, buys everything, and they throw something in. He buys fruit. He buys fruit for the company, and they throw something. If he uses his credit card, he wants to tie in. He's the Baal HaMomoin. Why? Because if the company goes bankrupt, he is now obligated to pay the credit card. If something happens, He hopes nothing happens. He hopes that the Babos will reimburse him. Let's say they have a fight. Let's say the bank company goes bankrupt. It's not, at the moment, he's put his money on the line. He's paid the money, and therefore he's the Baal HaMomoin. That's what he says. The other poskim don't seem to say that. They seem to say very posh that it's going to be reimbursed. It's the same thing. Just because he put the money, yeah, sure, he made Alvo, he lent him the money. But Lemaisa, the Baal HaMomoin is the one who ultimately, at the end of the day, he's the one who's going to pay the money. So that's what they say. That's what he's considered Baal HaMomoin, and he's the one who will be entitled to at least a chaylik according to the various shittas. Ashkoyach.
For our next speaker, I'd like to call up a Magid Shir, Yeshiva Dela, HaRav Coleman.
There's a hero of the Rebbe, Benegea, to Kinus Torah, and there should also be words of Hisedrus, Benegea to the mitzvahs of Tzedakah, and also Avos Yisrael. So since no one else took the opportunity, so a brief word, a famous word, but it's an important one to remember. The Alter Rebbe says that through the Avodas HaTzedakah, Naisin Meichi V'Libay Zaken 11 Pamim Kacha, that through Tzedakah, and for sure through Tzedakah Beruchnius, by helping out another Yid in Kima Mitzvahs, it refines a person 1,000 times more. And as the Rebbe says, that it's not Nishkan Guzma, it means really something which would have taken a person 1,000 hours, will now take him only 1 hour. If someone has such a Hisedrus that they want to give tzedakah right now, even though it's night, they'll be Kabbalah, it's a question. I'm sure the Rabbonim over here will kind of hear. You can come closer. That's a good one. If you sit all the way at the back, of course you're not going to hear that. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I was saying that if someone has such a serious right now to get tzedakah, I'm sure that the Rabbonim will find a heter, even while Kabbalah, it's not it's a Shaya about giving tzedakah at night. Well, we'll find a way. I want to speak about a halacha in Rambam. I consider it the Lubavitcher Rambam. Really, every Rambam is a Lubavitcher Rambam, but this halacha in particular is near and dear to the hearts of every Chassid Chabad. It's the halacha in Rambam at the end of Perek Beis of Gerushin, which the Rebbe mentioned on many occasions and forms an important yisoid in the outlook of Lubavitch and indeed of Yiddishkeit. The Rambam says that someone that the din is that he has to be megarish as ishtay, he doesn't want to be megarish. So the base din in any place, they are makinei say ad she'em reitzani. That they hit him, they force him until he says reitzani, and then they write the get, and his get kosher. They could also they could hire goyim also to beat the guy up. Now says the Rambam as follows. He asks, "V'lamali bittul get zeh? Why isn't this get bottle? Sharei hu honest? It's l'chora neinas. Bein biad Akon, bein biad Yisrael." Answers the Rambam, "She'en oimrim honest el l'mi shenilchatz v'nidchak lasis davar she'en mechuyev b'ay min ha'Torah." Last say. You only say that something is einus when it's something which you aren't required to do min ha'Torah. K'gayin mishol k'ad shemachar, like if you hit someone until he sold, yad shenasan until he gave him matana. Someone who, it's just the Yetzer Hara has got a hold of them in order to be Mevatel Mitzvah, and they hit him until he does the thing that he's supposed to do. Yeah, continues the Rambam. The truth is that every Yid deep down wants to be a Yid. He wants to do all the mitzvahs deep down. And it's only its Yetzer Hara which is holding back his real ratzon. They hit him until they beat his Yetzer Hara down. So then, after they beat him up, his pnimis and the neshama comes out, and it's taka gerish l'ritzaynai. Continues the Rambam at the end. What if the goyim forced him to be megarish shalei kadin? Ain't a get, and it doesn't work. Okay, ad kan for what's in the get does. So when you look at the Makeiris in the Gemara, for this halacha in Rambam, a few questions start to arise. Where does this come from in the Gemara? There's two parallel sugyas. There's Gemara in Bava Basra, Daf Mem Ches, which says as follows: Amar Rav Huna, Tuluyu v'zabin zvinis vinei. If they force a person into making a sale, it's a good sale. Gemara learns out, where do we learn that from? First it brings from Karbonis, Yaakov Yisayim Lam Shekevin Yisay, Yochel Bal Korchay, Talmud Lemar Lertzaynei, Haketzad Kevin Yisay Achi Yemereitzani. Says the Gemara, maybe a case of a carbon is different. Dilma shiny hasam the nichele that have it like kapara. There he gets a kapara through the carbon. Okay, so ask the Gemara from elsewhere. The element seifa. V'chein atayim begitting noshim. Regards to gitting noshim. Kevin they say achiyem reitzani. Also you force him. You hit him until he says reitzani. Says the Gemara. Dilma shiny hasam the mitzvah l'shmei divrei chachamim. Maybe that's different because there he has a mitzvah to listen to the chachamim. Continues the Gemara. Ela svarahu. Rava it's a svara. Agav unsei gomer makna. That he was because of this einus that they're hitting him, they're forcing him. Therefore, he decided to go ahead with the kinyan. The Gemara, I didn't bring it over here on the page, but the Gemara continues to imply that essentially we're chayzer from the svara of the Rambam, which the Rambam brings. Yeah, the Rambam is essentially explaining the svara of that there's a mitzvah l'shmei divrei chachamim, and meaning that every Yid wants to do the right thing deep down, he wants to keep all the mitzvahs. That's what the Rambam is explaining, so that's what the Gemara says. It sounds like that the Gemara is chayzer from this. Ella svarahu, yeah, agav unsei gomer makne, and later on in the Gemara it uses a lashon, the name agav unsei gomer megarish. Yeah, so seemingly it would seem from a superficial read of the Gemara that this isn't the maskana. In fact, it comes out even more of a question. The truth is more of a question on the Gemara itself rather than just on the Rambam, because, like I said, we have a parallel sugya. There's a Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Mem Tes. Over there, the sugya is about Dvarim Shebelev. It's also on the sheet over here, and we start off. Amirava have Dvarim Shebelev. Dvarim Shebelev enam Dvarim. Minolei l'Ravaha Ilema Mihadr Tnan Yakir Vaisai. We have the same lumad by Karbonis. Elam is Seifa, the same lumad again. V'chein Atamaitz Begitei Noshim Shechrori Avodim Kaifin. They say Achi Yemereitzani V'amai. Ask the Gemara, well, how does that work? In his heart, it's not really nichalei. Elav mishum damrin on dvarim shableiv on dvarim must be this is a raya vad dvarim shableiv in dvarim. Says the Gemara, v'dil mashayni hasam mishum the mitzvah l'shmei divrei chachamim. And that's the end of the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't give the same answer that it gave in Bava Basra and say Ella svarahu agavun say Gomer Magarish. So really, you could say that it's not just a question on the Rambam; it's a question on the Gemara. Or you could ask that why does the Rambam pick the Gemara in Kedushin over the Gemara in Bava Basra? So Al Korcha either he picks one over the other, or he understands that there's no machlekes l'maskana. Yeah, but there has to be an understanding of why the Rambam chose to explain this reason of mitzvah l'shmei divrei chachamim, which the Rambam explains in a beautiful arichas about how every Yid wants to really do and be mekayim mitzvahs. Another question is that the Rambam asks, Lama loy bittul get zeh? Why isn't this get bottle? Well, if you have the svara of agav unsei gomer megarish, then that's your answer. Yeah, the same way that the Rambam himself paskins l'gabe mechira in Hilchas Mechira, Perek Yud Halacha Aleph, this din of telu v'zobin zvinis vinei. So the same way that it works, agav unsei gomer makne. So what's the question? Why isn't this get bottle? If we have this answer from the Gemara, very simple. It's not bottle because agav unsei gomer megarish. He decided through the einus, he decided to be a megarish. Why does the Rambam? Where does the Rambam get this question from? That maybe this get should be bottle. What's the problem? Another thing which is interesting in the Lashon Rambam is that he says, to answer this question, he says, we don't say eines, ein oimrim me'anos, el l'mish nilchatz v'nitchak klasi is davar she'ein l'mechuyev by. Yeah, min ha'Torah. We only say anos, l'gabi something you're not required to do min ha'Torah. Kagain, yeah, like what? Misha hukah at shemachar. What's taka b'halach over there? We just said it. The Rambam himself paskins in Hilchas Mechira, but it works. He said, we only say, well, he's trying to explain the difference is, there's a difference between Gerushin and other things. Other things you're not required to do, like Mechira. But Mechira taka works. Bechir taka works within Einis. Well, he's sounding like, but there's there's a difference. There's a chisaron by Mechir, but it's not true. The Rambam himself paskins like this Gemara to luvizov and zvin is vinay. The other thing we need to understand is that also if we're saying the svara of agav unsei gomer megaresh, then taka, why is the last point that the Rambam mentioned? Why is that true? Yeah, but if the goyim forced him shalei kadin to give the get, and it's not a get, well, why not? I think Saf kol Saf, Agav unsei gomer megarish. He was forced into it, and he decided to give the get. So why isn't it valid? Why does it make a difference whether it was al pi din or not? Saf kol Saf, Agav unsei gomer megarish. We hold that svara. So v'haktim, what's pshat in Agav unsei gomer makne? I'd like to suggest, but it doesn't mean that we assume that the person had full intent, that he suddenly became happy with it, and now he's wholeheartedly giving it. What's going on over here is he's being forced. Agav unsei, he does the Maaseh, Kinyan, and we have no reason to because he's not expressed. Taka, there is a halacha, there is a din, but if he's tzeveach b'fnei edim, that he's really doesn't want to be maknev, and that works to be mevatlet. Yeah, but the Vaila, we don't have any reason. His Maisa is showing that he's selling. Now, is it possible that he doesn't want to sell? Yeah, it's possible he doesn't want to sell, but we have nothing to prove that. We have nothing to prove that. We have nothing to say that that's not the case. So as long as it's not clear to us that he's not canceling the sale, we go by his actions. Now, does this hold true also of Gerushin? There are some things in which it's not shaykh by them, but it can be partial, that it could be a suffix, that it could be a miktas. One famous example is from the Dvar Avram brought in L'Kutei Sichos, Chelik Zayin, in the Yeshivos. It's a famous word from the Dvar Avram, L'Gabi Sfiras Eimer, which we just finished. The Dvar Avram says that a person can't count Sfira Misafik, meaning if a person doesn't know what day it is, and he says today is either 5 days or 6 days. So why doesn't it work? Because Sfira is Pshat, a birur. You're saying definitively today is 5 days. Well, today is whatever days it is. Yeah, it's the whole point is that it's a birur. There's no such thing as a suffix birur. If something is a suffix birur, it's nishkin birur. Yeah, there's some things that doesn't work unless it's 100%. Yeah, if it's any level of suffix, you're not sure which day it is. So then the counting isn't counting. Counting is establishing which day it is. Yeah, the Rebbe brings this far. The Rebbe says that it's as far as sichlisi. It makes a lot of sense. The Rebbe has a kasha that how did anyone count Sfiras Eimer in the places where the Shluchei Bezdin couldn't reach for at least the first few days of Sfiras Eimer? How would it be possible? Al Karchach, they had to count Misafik. The Rebbe says that Ein Sefer Tachas Yodi, and the Rebbe said, I don't know whether he touches on this in Koda. From memory, I think he actually does raise this point. I can't remember his answer. But Al Kolpanim, like the Rebbe says, as far as Sichlisi, at least you understand that there's such a gather. But there are some things in which it's not shaykh that there could be a suffix. It's not shaykh there could be a miktzas. It's either the thing or it's not. Yeah. So one of these examples could be Sfira. Sfira, it's you're either Sefer, and Sefer is an Indian from Vados, from Birur. Yeah. And if it's not 100%, then it's not that. Same thing, Eidus. Eidus can only be, Eidus is Pshat Birur in the Maisa. If it's not 100% Eidus, then it's Nishkin Eidus. You have another idea which comes out of this, similar from the Rebbe has a Geschmackelet and Igros Kedish Chelik Halef. It's actually about the Maila of Mishnais Balpeh. And in the Ha'aretz is a long arichos about dinim which are tfulim b'machshava. And what comes out from the Rebbe's beer is a Geschmacke Indian. We say when it comes to the din of ein adam eiser davar she'ein shalai, that you can't answer with your machshava something which isn't yours. I brought over here, for example, in the case of shchita, if two people shechting together, and one person says afterwards that I had in mind that it should be for avodah zarah. So, if the animal is in his, then we say that it's not. It doesn't make a difference. Ein adam eiser davar she'ein shalai. What's the reason? That's the reason, because we're assuming that he only wants to cause him tsar. He didn't really have in mind to shecht it for avodah zarah. Yeah, isn't the question? Shouldn't it be at least a suffix? mean, maybe you don't know. Like, it's possible that he was just trying to cause him tsar. It's also possible that you don't know what was going on in his mind. It's also possible that he had in mind the Shachted Vavei Dezar. Shouldn't be at least a suffix. Comes out from the Rebbe's beer over there in Igros Kedesh, a Geschmack answer that my machshava has nothing to do with your item, with your maisa. Yeah. The only way that my machshava, that I can affect your item, is if there's a maisa in which it's machshavta is nikeres meteich maisav, in which you can see that it's niker the machshava within the maisa. If it's already a suffix, whether it's nikeres, then it's not nikeres. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's a suffix. It could be that he was being mechaven to Avodah Zarah, or it could be that it was a tsar. Since my machshava has no kesher to your item, in order for it to actually affect it, it needs to be a maisa in which it's nikeres and machshava. If it's suffix nikeres, it's not nikeres. So then already it doesn't affect. Another example, going back to our Inyan, is the gabe krisus of the get. The Gemara in Gittin, Daf Tes, says, "V'amar Rav Yosef, bar Binyomin, Amar Rav Nachman, Shchim Roshei Kazav Kol Nechasav Lavdei, V'amad Chayzer Ben Nechasim, Ve'enich Chayzer Be'eved, Chayzer Ben Nechasim, Man Shchim Rahu, Ve'enich Chayzer Be'eved, Sharei Yotzal Avshem Ben Chayrin, El Amar Rav Ashi, Hasam Ainu Taimo Mishum Delav Krus Gitahu." So it's speaking about where there's a Matan Shchimra and he's Meshayir part of it. Yeah. So says Rashi, where it doesn't work for Eved to go free. Why? Because lav krus gitahi. Explains Rashi, Gabe Isha Ksiv Sefer Krisus. Yeah, it's connected the Krisus of an Eved to the Krisus of an Isha. Shechruri Avodim Gamri la mi Isha. The Ksiv Chufashan Leinidin yeah, and so on. Given the Ikala Meimar, says Rashi, very interesting. Given the Ikala Meimar, the Shiare, it's possible. Ikala Meimar, it's not vadois. It's possible that he was Meshayir. Yeah, and if he was Meshayir, then could be that the Eved is also included in this year. So therefore, lav krisus gomerhu, because it's possible it's Ikala Meimar that he was Meshayir. So therefore, it's not krisus. What do you see from this Rashi? Gewaltige Yesod. Krisus is the same idea. Krisus is either krisus 100% or it's not. Krisus means cutting off. Yeah, if it's not cut off completely, if it's ikala meimar, if it's possible but there's no krisus, then there's nishkin krisus. It's al derech, it's not the same thing. It's al derech the Gemara in Gittin about if a person is zerek to get to a woman and he has a string. Yeah, he has a tiny little string. Yeah, it's not krisus. Why? Because as long as he retains a tiny little part, that he could pull it back. That's not krisus klal klal. Yeah. So legabe the krisus of the get is not shaykh that there could be a miktas, a suffix. Yeah, a krisus is krisus 100% or not. Now for sure you have sveikas in Gittin. Yeah, you have sveikas in Gittin, but those are when the suffix is a davar study, suffix karivla. Yeah, it's a zaytikar Indian which is causing the suffix. But if it's a suffix in the etzim krisus, yeah, then it's nishkin krisus b'chlal. That it doesn't qualify as krisus. So this maybe is the hechrech of the Rambam. Yeah, why the Rambam either sees it as no machlekes, either the Rambam learned that when we said in the Gemara in Bava Basra that agav unse Gomer makne, the answer is only going on the kinyonim. Yeah, so you could read like that in the Gemara, but the Gemara is only chayzer legabe the kinyonim and not legabe the kovenus achiyim reitzani of the krisus. Or you could say that it's a machlekes in the sugis, and the Rambam chose kedushin over Bava Basra. Why? What's the hechrich? So the hechrich is that legabe gittin, it doesn't make sense to say, yeah, that there's an ifsharius, yeah, that because it could be. And there's a suffix agav unse gomeru megarish, meaning it's not certain, but there's nothing to tell us otherwise. So it could be that he wanted to be megarish, could be not. If such an eifin for gerushin doesn't work, yeah, that l'chor we can say is a hechrich for the Rambam. That in such a case agav unse gomeru megarish wouldn't work. Because that's relying on the fact that there's, we're assuming there's a suffix, there's, to some degree. But for krisus, there's no such thing. Only for kinyonim, yeah, you can say that you can say that, but not for krisus, because krisus has to be 100%. So this answers the first shaila. And also answers the second shaila of where is the Rambam coming from? What's the question of the Rambam? Yeah, we said the Rambam asked why isn't this get bottle? Well, we would have a simple answer because Agavon Segom Mergarish. Well, that's why it's not bottle. No, the Rambam is bothered by this question because here the Agavon Segom Mergarish taka wouldn't work. Like we just explained, if it's not 100% krisus, it's not krisus at all. So that's why the Rambam wonders, taka, why is it not bottle? Also, we said that it's interesting that the Rambam quotes that when do we say Eines is only legabe something which you're not chayav to do, you're not mechuyev to do in a Torah, like mechira. Yeah, but the Rambam himself paskins that in mechira it works with Eines. So, what the Rambam is trying to say isn't pshat that there's a chisaron in the mechira because of Eines. He's saying that when does the geder of Eines apply is only to something like mechira. Here, there's no geder Eines at all to begin with. Yeah, there's no geder Eines at all to begin with. Here, it's a case of where B'Panimius he wants to do it. Yeah, and Eines doesn't apply over here because Eines is relying on this idea about that Agav Onsei Gomer Megarish, that there's some suffix that maybe it could be that he wanted, maybe he didn't want. That's what the Rambam's saying. Not that there is a chisaron because of Eines. Taka he paskins that it still works as mechira. But he's saying over there is shaykh the geder Eines. Over here there's no Eines me'akara. Yeah, that's the difference. And finally, the last question we asked of why does the Rambam say that if the what's the havon in them that the Rambam says that if the goyim forced him when it was shalei kedin that it doesn't work, like we asked that saf kol saf agav onsei gomer megarish, meaning they forced kedin shalei kedin whatever they forced him and he agreed to do it. Yeah, the answer is based on what we said that the Rambam isn't holding a visvara of agav onsei gomer megarish. He's learning that it's from the rotzen pnimi v'yid. Yeah, and if it's shalei kedin, then of course he's lacking in the rotzen pnimim u'meila. Yeah, then it's not megureshes. So we started off with an Indian about tzedakah, and as an Indian to speak about the series of tzedakah and Avos Yisrael. So Avos Yisrael, the Dvar medabrim ba'ad atzmam, this halacha in Rambam about look the pnimis v'yid, especially when you try to encourage him in doing Torah mitzvahs, increasing in Torah mitzvahs. It's very encouraging for a person to know that the pnimis v'yid always wants to do Torah mitzvahs, and we should be very successful in all these inyanim.
For our last speaker, Achin Chaviv. Here. They call upon a Bocher HaTamim, Shaya Groner.
All right. So the Gemara in Brachas, Daf Yudalad Amud Beis, it says like this. Rav Moshe Yadi v'kara kriyash ma'av'anach tefillin v'umatzli. That Rav would first wash his hands, then put on tefillin, and then say, first say Kriyashma, then put on tefillin, and then daven. So for the Gemara, how could you do this? He's pot from everything. Then it says something that's opposite, but it says it said he comes out of the when Kriyashma time happens, then he goes out of the kever and he first puts in tefillin, then says Kriyashma. There's a whole shaklav tari, it's negeh, but we don't have time. But it says, so how can Rav first say Kriyashma and then daven? So it says that shluchahu da'avis, that basically he used to have a shliach who would just bring him his tefillin, and this guy came late, and he was scared that he was going to miss man Kriyashma. But so therefore he first say Kriya Shema and then put on tefillin. But generally he would first say Kriya, first he would put on tefillin and then say Kriya Shema. Oh, I forgot to. Then the Gemara says like this: Whoever says Kriya Shema and doesn't put on tefillin, then he is made sheker. He's made sheker on himself. That is, if he brought a carbon without the mincha or without the nesachim. When it contains Rabbi Yechanan, Shleima, Yifni Vieto Yadav, Yinech Tfilin, Yikr Kirshma, Vispalo. So he Mal Shemaim Shleima. The best way to do Kabbalah Mal Shemaim is to first put on Tfilin and then say Kriya Shema. So L'chaira, this
and this is brought down as halacha in Torah and in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. So l'chayra, this brings into question the minhag that many Chassidim have, is that to daven late, and you might, if you're davening late, you might pass Kriya Shema. When you say Kriya Shema, but you might be past the time, and therefore we say Kriya Shema before. So l'chayra, you should put in tefillin. So the Rabbi, for bringing it in Chav Chesiv and Tavshin Beis, he says like this: Taka, the Rebbe Rashab used to do that, and there's a letter in the Friedrich Rebbe's Igros to Benoit Bachrim, to that if they want to eat mizonos, they should say Kriya Shema first, and he says with tefillin. But the Rebbe says that we see that many people don't do this, and the question is why. So he quotes a sefer called Ois Chaim V'Sholim. It's by the Munkatcher, the Minchas Lazar, and the Minchas Lazar asks the same question, and the Beis Yitzchak also asks this question, and he says like this. He says that there's the Chayza says halacha that it's brought in Menachos Tezvav and Beis that Nesachim you can bring even 10 days after the carbon itself. Now, just like you can bring the Nesachim achazman after you bring the carbon, so too, if you're saying Shema and afterwards you're going to put on tefillin, since you're going to be since you're going to be becoming the mitzvah, therefore you're not made shekel atzmei because you're becoming the mitzvah. The whole thing that's made shekel atzmei because it says and you're not doing it, but if you're doing it afterwards, then it's fine. So the Munkatcher continues and says that l'chayra this is only brings this. The Rebbe says this is the only just say it's that it's fine to do this. But B'Poel, you should just like you should bring a carbon with the Nesachim, so too you should B'Poel put tefillin on when you say Kriya Shema. The Kriya Shema before is called Kriya Shema Ketana. Either way. Now, so he brings the second reason. Behektim. The Shulchan Aruch says that tzitzis is kodem l'tefillin. Besides the fact that it's tadir, he brings this ma'alim b'kodesh that tzitzis is a tishmish mitzvah and tefillin is a tishmish ketosha, and therefore you first put tzitzis and then you put in tefillin. So frak the shagas ma'alim b'kodesh only applies with one mitzvah. For example, Chanukah, you do one and then you do two. It's one mitzvah, but two separate mitzvahs. Adarabah, it's not just that you do the ma'alim b'kodesh, you do the first one, the one that's kodesh first. So the Achronim answer that in this case, we're talking about the guf of the person. First, the person puts on tzitzis, and then he puts on tefillin. And so, in the guf of the person, he is one level of kedusha with tzitzis, and then another level of kedusha with the tzitzis and the tefillin, and therefore a ma'alim b'kodesh. So the Munkatcher says the same thing. L'gabe tefillin, Kriya Shema tefillin. Kriya Shema, which is machshava and dibur, you do first, and then afterwards you put on tefillin. And that's ma'alim b'kodesh, and you put on tefillin with Kriya Shema, and then you're first doing the Kriya Shema itself, and then you're doing tefillin and Kriya Shema, and then it's ma'alim b'kodesh. And that's why the Rav, why did we say shluchu da'avis, that it was the shleich's fault, but usually he wouldn't do it? Because it says he would put on tefillin, then matzli, he would daven, he wouldn't say Kriya Shema. The second, when he put on tefillin, he wouldn't say Kriya Shema, and therefore it would be no ma'alim b'kodesh. Because the reason we say ma'alim b'kodesh is if you say Kriya Shema with tefillin. There's questions in this, b'chlal, but we can bring a raya from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in Siman Lamed Daled, where the Alter Rebbe says that Rabbeinu Tam, if you're scared that if you're putting on Rabbeinu Tam, if you're putting on Rabbeinu, according to Rabbeinu Tam, the halach is if you're putting on Rabbeinu Tam, according to Rabbeinu Tam, according to Rashi, according to Rabbeinu Tam, when you put on tefillin first, when you said Shema first, it was without tefillin, because according to him, Rashi's tefillin is not tefillin, and therefore, when you said Kriya Shema, but during davening, you weren't putting, it was without tefillin, so you'd be made shekel atzmai. So what does the Alter Rebbe say? Just say Shema in Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin, so there's no issue. So it's the same thing here, just like you're saying Kriya Shema before, and you say, just like when you say Kriya Shema before, and then afterwards you put tefillin on with Kriya Shema. So too in Rabbeinu Tam's. So too in our case, when you before davening you say Kriya Shema, and then afterwards during davening you put Kriya Shema, you say Kriya Shema in tefillin. Sorry, but it was a bit unclear, but no. And Stam, if you think there's a problem, the whole thing of Malam Kodesh is when you become the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. And when you're doing the second time, if it's after, you already did the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, so what's the Malam Kodesh? Malam Kodesh, first doing the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, then you're doing the tefillin with just Kriya Shema. But this is just Stam Kriya Shema, you're not doing any mitzvah. So the Gemara says, how do you do Malchus Shamayim Shleima? With Kriya Shema, with tefillin and Kriya Shema. And it's Siman Nun Ches of the Alter Rebbe says that the whole day is Shayach. Saying Kriya Shema the whole day, you're still doing the Kabbalah Tzol Malch Shemaim. So it doesn't make a difference if it was La'achar Zman. Even if it doesn't make a difference if it was after Gizman Kriya Shema. Since the whole thing is Kabbalah Tzol Malch Shemaim, when you putting tefillin on and with Kriya Shema, then there's no issue. So talking about the Alter Rebbe, there's a question. The Alter Rebbe starts off when he quotes this halach in Shulchan Aruch, he only says the vart of made shekel atzmei. He doesn't say the vart of that it's like hikr carbon le'nechasim sachim. Yeshloima that the Yeshloima behektim that the Rebbe in the Maimer, this is in a Sikha, so the Maimer says before, he explains the whole idea of Nesachim and Kabbalah. He says, like, what's the Indian of Kabbalas? Kabbalas, the Indian is Halal Malamat Lamaila. It's B'chinas Eish Shinik B'Lamaila. What's the Indian of Nesachim? It's Yer Lishis and it's going down, it's Milamaila Lamata. Same to Krishma. Krishma, it's Islavas, is being bottled, it's Oil Lamaila. Tefillin is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad on Klaf Gashmi, it's Maila Lamata. And just like Kriya Shema, just like when you say Kriya Shema without tefillin, meaning you only do the halaw of Lamaila, Lamata Lamaila, and not Lamata Lamaila, it's made Shekel Atzmei. So too, when you hikriv carbon, B'loi Nesachim, it's also made Shekel Atzmei. Why? Because the Mishkan is called Mishkan Eidos. What's the whole point of Mishkan? The Mishkan is a dwelling place for Hashem here. So if you only do the Aveda of Milamata Lamaila, you're not doing the whole Aveda of the Mishkan. It's Mishkan Eidos, you're made Shekel Atzmai. If you only do the Aveda of Milamata Lamaila, you have to do the Aveda of Milamata Lamaila. Milamata, yeah. So we can see here that the Vart, according to the Rebbe, the Vart of Ola, that it's made Shekel Atzmei, and the Vart of Rabbi Yechanan, which it's Hikr Oil Ben Yisachim, is the one and the same thing. Both of just like Kriya Shema without tefillin is made Shekel Atzmei, so too Nesachim and without Karbonos without Nesachim is made Shekel Atzmei, and therefore when the Alter Rebbe says he just mentions the fact of made Shekel Atzmei, he doesn't bring the Vart of Nesachim, he's including the Vart of Nesachim because made Shekel Atzmei. Uli Yesh Leimer. Now. Back to what we said. Originally, we said that the Rebbe Rashab used to put on tefillin before. We just said that there's a reads to. And I found that the Rebbe himself used to also put tefillin on before when he said Kriya Shema Katano. So, we can answer like this. There's a few answers, there's shvach answers, but we can answer like this. The Rebbe continues, the Munkach actually continues like this. He says this whole Shakavatariya is only legabe Kriya Shema Kodim Tefillah before davening, but after davening, when you say Shema, you can say it without tefillin. So this brings a question into what we find by the Goyim. The Goyim used to daven Ma'ariv early, and they used to put tefillin on. They used to leave their tefillin on the whole day until Ma'ariv, and only after Kriya Shema Shel Arvis would they take it off, because they didn't want to say Shema without tefillin. And we find by the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer used to. He would do the opposite of what the Alter Rebbe says. He used to not say Shema by Rabbeinu Tam's. Why? Because the halach is like Rashi, and therefore, according to Rashi, you don't have tefillin on b'chlal, and you're saying Shema, you're being made Shekel Atzmei. So that's a steer to what the whole thing we said. So he answers that this whole thing, the whole day, that they wouldn't say Kriya Shema without tefillin is only according to them who would put tefillin on the whole day. Because what did you say before? That you're not made Shekel Atzmei if you're Mekayim the mitzvah in the end. So you could say Kriya Shema now and later on put on tefillin. But they would put tefillin on the whole day. So to Mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin, they would be putting tefillin on the whole day. And therefore, if they said Shema without tefillin, it'd be made Shekel Atzmei because they have to, at that point, they have to be put on tefillin. But since these days we don't have that chiyuv, then there's no issue. So the Rebbe explains on why we don't put tefillin on the whole day. He continues, he says that just like for example, like a shofar. Shofar, why do we blow Yom Shoshana Shalias B'Shabbos? We don't blow shofar. Why? Because it's not going to be poil the hamshachas that it needs to, and therefore we have the ksus al pi nigla. Why we don't blow shofar? Same thing like over here, that we don't put tefillin on holiday, not just because it's gufnafi, because it's not going to be poil the hamshachas, and therefore there's no point. But the Rebbe continues and says like this, that I'll just read it. Shini Zen and Gael gam yichidei skula shafil bezman hazeh bekoichem v'chaltam lifel hamshacha yisisera al yidei enoch tefillin kol yom k'moish bezman hagoyim, that they're able to be poilis hamshacha, and this includes the Rabbonim. But why don't they? Why don't they? We saw the Rebbe, now the Rabbonim put tefillin on the whole day, is because the dirt isn't ready for this. So Ulei Shloim, this is the reason why the Rabbonim used to put tefillin on before. That although they're koyach, that although b'pearl they didn't put tefillin on the whole day, since be'etzim they were able to be pearl hamshach, and they be'etzim should have been putting a tefillin the whole day. When they were makayim the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, they had to have tefillin on them because they don't be made shekal atma, because they at that point should be technically having tefillin. This is very much an ulei shleimar, but because also the other Ben Rabbach and Rabbonim, there's a Frierdiker Rebbe clearly told them that maybe they should. And also there's a minor from Toshin and Aleph that the Rebbe said to ask a Rav, like someone asked him, should we put tefillin on before when we say Kriya Shema Ketana? And the Rebbe said, Shatz Rav, which is confusing because the Rebbe is mashma here that it's you shouldn't do it. But either way, the Rebbe explains this whole Indian that what's just like where you made shekalatma, if you don't do the avodah of l'mayla l'mata, so too you might think that your entire avodah you should be only l'mayla should be focused on your own avodah, but really, what's the whole point? We should make a mishkan edus. We have to be poiled down here. We have to be mamshech down here, and just like the Rabbonim, just like the first it says the Eibishter Anvus Fenusi Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu, he created this world. He went down here, and so too the Rabbonim, the tzaddikim Liberow, that the Rabbonim they could have been involved in their own avodah, but they were poil in. They were involved in askanos v'chulu. So too, and we see also the Rebbe says later on that why didn't they put tefillin on the whole day? Because the door wasn't roy lakach. That they lowered themselves to the level of the door. So too we can't just do the avodah of l'mata. We have to do the avodah of l'mata to be pearled down here, to be avodah mazulas, to work with other people, and through that, and that's also the whole word of Shavuos, and through that we can bring Mashiach. Hear the voice.
Eshkeach for all the Merstatzvim, for all the speakers, all the listeners. Stay till the end. And for the tefillah, the Eibishter should send the Mashiach right now. And Meir will be in 5 minutes.